Michelle's been there twice, but if they want me to go this time. Yeah, I'll get it. So we're down there, I think it's in February. Yeah, first time since COVID.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get the City Commission meeting started. If you can, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I would be remiss with the date of today to not signify its importance. So I'm going to go a little off script here, because on this day, 22 years ago, September 11th, 2001, 246 people went to the airports for their morning flights. 2,606 people reported to their jobs. 343 firefighters reported to their stations for a shift. 60 police officers reported to their precinct for morning patrol. 8 paramedics reported to their ambulances for their morning shift of saving lives. None of them saw past 10 a.m. September 11th, 2001. In one single moment, life may never be the same. The attack took thousands of lives and forever changed the world that we now live in. It is important to remember that were it not for the incredible bravery of so many, untold thousands more may have been lost. So I just want to take a moment of silence to remember what today means. Al, roll call.
Benson.
Here.
Brunig. Here. Hanoff.
Here.
Johnson.
Present.
Minor.
Here.
Schramm.
Here.
Villanueva.
Here.
Weber.
Here.
Mayor Moser.
Here.
City Manager Leon.
Here.
City Attorney Denherter.
Here.
Next under routine business is to approve the minutes of the work session meeting of August 28, 2023, and the regular meeting of August 28, 2023. What is your pleasure?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any commission discussion on the minutes? Anybody in the public? All those in favor of approving the minutes say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. And anybody abstaining? All right, minutes pass. Number 3 under routine business is schedule of bills. What is your pleasure?
Move to pay the bills.
Second. We have a motion and a second to pay the bills. Any commission discussion on paying the bills? Anybody in the public? Roll call.
Brunig.
Aye.
Hanoff.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Minor.
Aye.
Schramm.
Aye.
Villanueva.
Aye.
Weber. Benson.
Aye.
Mayor Moser.
Aye, motion carries. We do have a set proclamation for tonight, but again, one place where I'd ask you to indulge me a little bit this evening. In that earlier today, we celebrated another group of people in our community. We do it at their workplace to kick off their week. And I read the proclamation there, but I don't want to slight them by not recognizing them tonight. So while they're not here, I'm going to read that proclamation. Whereas direct support professionals deliver individualized services and support for South Dakotans with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and whereas there are nearly 3,300 direct support professionals working for 20 community service provider agencies and the South Dakota Developmental Center, and whereas direct support professionals support individuals with disabilities to earn prevailing wages and foster careers in their communities, and whereas communities are strengthened and enriched by their inclusion of all members of society, regardless of their disability. And whereas Direct Support Professionals Week is an opportunity to recognize the dedicated, hardworking, and compassionate professionals who support individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and to thank them for their service. So I did proclaim the week of September 11th, 2023 as Direct Support Professionals Recognition Week in Yankton, South Dakota. That business that I was at today is ABS. And so I'm really excited excited that these two are partnered together tonight because I do think if we think of entities in our community that really create opportunities for everyone to learn, engage, and thrive and grow in our community, I probably couldn't think of two better groups doing that tonight, and ABS is one of them. So if you could, let's give them a round of applause for what they're doing. All right, thank you for that. As you'll see, we do have one proclamation that we are reading tonight, and again, excited for that one. Our community's success depends on making sure that all residents feel welcome here. In addition to our long-term residents, new residents are a vital part of our community, bringing fresh perspectives and new ideas, starting businesses, and contributing to the vibrant diversity that we all value. This week, we honor the spirit of unity that is bringing neighbors together across our community of Yankton, South Dakota. During Welcoming Week, I invite all residents of Yankton to join this movement of communities nationwide by renewing our commitment to our core American values and by taking action in the spirit of welcoming. By working together, we can achieve greater prosperity and make our community the kind of place where diverse people from around the world feel valued and want to create their homes. Regardless of where we are born or what we look like, we are neighbors, united in our efforts to build a stronger community. By recognizing the contributions that we all make to create a vibrant culture and a growing economy, we make our community more prosperous and more inclusive to all who call it home. Let us come together to build communities where every resident has the opportunity to contribute at his or her best. Let us come together to create more prosperous communities and to reaffirm that our community of Yankton, South Dakota still stands as a beacon of freedom and opportunity. Now, therefore, I, Stephanie Mosier, Mayor of Yankton, by virtue of authority vested in me, do hereby proclaim the week of September 8th through the 17th, 2023, Welcoming Week. I call upon the people of Yankton, South Dakota to join together, united to build a stronger, more vibrant, prosperous community where everyone can feel welcome to live, work, and thrive. Happy Welcoming Week. I'm going to walk this over to Rita, who I know is talking, but our very own Commissioner Johnson, I hear, is president. So lots of good ties to that. But Rita is going to be coming forward to talk to us about connecting cultures and what they're doing for Welcoming Week. I know they took a picture outside, so I'm just going to walk this over to her while she comes up to the podium. So Rita, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, thank you. Monica, you want to hold this for me, please? Thank you. So, and before I get started, I'd like everyone in Connecting Cultures who came tonight for the picture to please stand to be recognized and proclaim that Yankton is a welcoming community.
Did you want another picture with the commissioners, or are you good with the one you took outside? Sorry, I didn't.
Oh, I don't know. I guess I think we're good.
Okay.
Yeah. So I wanted to share a little bit about Welcoming Week. This is actually the 5th year that Yankton has been celebrating Welcoming Week. And what it is, it's an annual campaign to celebrate and showcase the movement of communities striving to become more of a welcoming place for all, especially newcomers to a community and to our country. It was actually launched in 2012 by Welcoming America, which is a nonprofit and also a nonpartisan organization, and its members, which includes Connecting Cultures of Yankton. Welcoming America provides individuals and communities the opportunities to proclaim welcoming values through events such as what we had on Saturday night, which was a welcoming celebration for our community, and through activities such as this tonight by our city commission. So thank you. But because these events help foster a mutual understanding, promote education and awareness of cultures, and together builds a stronger and more connected community for all who call it home. So at the core, and to keep it simple, I like to say that it's the week is celebrated by communities across the globe. And it really gets back to connecting neighbors of all backgrounds throughout the communities, through activities and events. And just like tonight here, we're all neighbors, so howdy neighbor. So I got to get back to that. Welcoming is much more, though, than just being friendly, tolerant, or peaceful. It is to be truly welcoming. A community needs intentional, inclusive practices and norms that enable all residents to live and thrive and contribute fully. A few years ago, Connecting Cultures had the theme, well, belonging begins with us. And I've always loved that because it really goes back to us. What do we each do to help others feel welcome? And it may have been a while, it's been 30 plus years since I moved to Yankton. So it's kind of harder to relate maybe to that move and the changes that individuals face when they move to a community. So I like to relate it to when we change jobs. How do we feel when we change jobs? Or when our kids go to a new school or start a new school year? You know, reflecting back on how did I feel when I met my coworkers for the first time on that first day. Did I feel nervous and overwhelmed and outside my comfort zone? Did anyone smile and say hello? And then as we move through the next few days, how do I feel? Do I reflect back and say moving maybe was too stressful and I made a bad decision? What do I belong here? And so it's important to reinforce that individuals feel welcome so they know that they made the right decision to be in the new workplace and to find their new comfort zone. It requires that maybe a little bit more than a simple smile and a hello at that point. It might be talking to them and asking them questions. So, and which is important, as we can all relate, because that level of belonging impacts the production of not just me in my workplace, but also the entire team. The feeling of belonging impacts how I feel about the job and how engaged I am and whether or not I want to stay in that culture. And then as time moves forward, let's say it's been a year, and evaluating that sense of belonging again. Do I feel that I want to stay here, or maybe do I want to start looking elsewhere? Do I may want to, can I feel that this is a place that I feel accepted, respected, welcomed, and engaged? And if everyone on my team feels that way, won't we be all giving that 100%, not just to work and building that culture, but the entire team and organization? So I feel that it's important to, maybe at that point, maybe I'm going to learn the language of the job. And I smiled when I saw Graham here tonight because I used to work with Graham. And I remembered when I worked in the CPA world, they speak a whole different language. We might have been speaking English, but it took me a while to understand the language of the industry. So again, that sense of belonging also impacts how quickly we learn the language of the workplace or the community, and whether or not they want to feel, or I feel, that I want to stay and build my career or my home in that community. And therefore, together, our community can all thrive if we feel like we belong. So I also want to close by inviting everyone to engage in welcoming activities with their neighbors, to create a community where everyone, no matter where they lived before or how long they have lived in Yankton, let's create a Yankton where everyone feels as if they belong in our community, and by belonging beginning with us, together our community can thrive. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, again, kudos to Connecting Culture and everything you're not only doing for Welcoming Week, but everything you do all year long. I know that you all are always very busy doing lots of things in our community to make folks feel welcome, and I'm very excited for that. I was just going to say, I bet Commissioner Johnson has a few words.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I just hope everyone has an appreciation for the hard work that Connecting Cultures is doing in the community. They're not only connecting cultures, but they're connecting our community in a sense that they're figuring out where the shortcomings are in making people feel welcome and having the tools to thrive here, and connecting resources to make sure we're addressing those issues. And that's an ongoing process. It's not easy, and there are a lot of challenges, but this group has really worked hard and had just a tremendously open approach to that process, which is why I'm so honored to be a part of it. Saturday night, we had a huge celebration, and it was beautiful. And these individuals in the audience and some who aren't here, they really worked hard to cook the food that was there, create a party atmosphere. And so to see it all come together, it was a really beautiful experience. And so, not only are they doing hard work, but they're doing heart work in the community, and it is making a difference. And I saw people with tears of joy in their eyes at that event. So it was very touching and very good work. So thank you to all of you.
Awesome. Anybody else? I don't know how you beat that. I like that, the heart work. I like that. You guys are all doing that, and we really appreciate everything you're doing in our community. All right, with that, then, we'll move on to the city manager's report. So I will turn it over to City Manager Leon.
Okay, thank you, Honorable Mayor, members of the commission, and those in the public and those on YouTube. The person that's on my heart this week for Welcoming Week is a lady named Fran Fox. I don't know if anybody knows Fran Fox. Yes. But she was on my calendar before I got in the office. And she was there to greet me with a smile, and she was put together and in her best dress, and she had a basket of goodies, and she was there to tell me where I needed to find everything in Yankton that I could find and the things I couldn't. And she truly made me feel welcome, and she stopped back. She invited me to join Women's Club, and she told me some of the history, and she shared with me some of the great places to go and eat, and I won't forget that. And she was part of the welcome wagon, which I'm not sure is even a thing anymore. But I thought, where am I, Mayberry? No, it was Yankton. But I'll never forget that about Fran, and so I think she's the original, Welcome Week ambassador for Yankton. Anyway, I have a few things for you all, just some announcements and some updates and some questions for commissioners. On Wednesday at 2 o'clock in Westside Park, we're going to have the dedication ceremony for the Labyrinth and Sundial. The McVeigh families are coming from Colorado and other places to join us, and the sisters from the monastery are going to join us. So commissioners and public, you're welcome to join us too. We're going to have a mayoral proclamation. Here's some words from the McVeighs as well as from the sisters, and we're going to walk the labyrinth together and do a dedication. So that'll be fun. I can't guarantee sun, but John McVeigh has indicated that he'll explain to us how the sundial works, rain or shine. So we'll look forward to having that. On Thursday, for the media's benefit and for the commission's information, we've all been invited at 5:15 to attend the United Way kickoff at the Boathouse. So lots of fun and celebration there, and opportunities for you to learn as commissioners and for you to learn as individuals all the programs and opportunities that United Way brings to our community. So there might be a quorum of commissioners present, but city business would not be discussed. So just making folks aware of that. When we get to your consent calendar, commissioners, there is a work session that I'm requesting for September 25th at our next meeting. The topic there would be video lottery. We have had you have had a request that Yankton consider either raising the cap of video lottery licenses or removing the cap altogether. And since I've been here, and I think quite a few years prior, we haven't talked about video lottery license numbers, caps, the license themselves, what that means. Ross and his staff put together some background information, which you have already. We're going to get it into a memo format. and just start talking. I don't expect you to make a decision, or if you do, we can put it on a future agenda. But I think there's a lot of things to consider there. And you may want to take in the information and then take it out to the community and talk more with them. So video lottery is what we're talking about. I want to say right now we have 39, is that correct, Al? So either adding an additional or lifting the cap or creating a new threshold, which you're able to do, and Ross will help explain all those statutes and what those mean. So that's what topic that would be if you should so set it on the 25th. Last meeting, if you can go back in your minds to last meeting, one of the topics we discussed was the employee tuition reimbursement program. We had an employee who had a request for a tuition reimbursement. They met the criteria. And we talked a little bit about should we be providing the name of that employee. And I did have a discussion with Ross. We talked about some of the legal implications there and gave that information to you. So I'm just finding out if I'm putting that on an agenda in the future or not, if somebody wants to talk about that further. I'm not hearing yes by anybody or seeing anybody who's saying yes, so.
Well, I wouldn't mind having it on an agenda. I don't sense a lot of support from the commission for revealing that kind of information, but to me, it's a bill, it's a public bill paid for by public funds, and should be public information.
Okay, I can put it on the agenda for September 25th, and I'll put together a memo with some of the information Ross had talked about, and then you guys can decide how you want to go forward. I'll also put together some information that our Human Resources Department talked about in terms of employee benefits when we get to that point. So I will get that on the agenda. When you get to the point of your budget public hearing, I did send this to the commission, but I did not share it yet publicly. I do have a couple of changes, nothing that substantially changes the budget, but I will, Mayor, ask for just a couple minutes to go over a few little edits from what was the draft proposed budget to what we would like to have to see change there. And of course, 5 of you can change anything in the budget as it stands, numbers-wise or program-wise, et cetera. West Side Park Pond update. Want to let the community know what I let the commission know last week. We did receive some numbers from Stockwell regarding what they believe the value of the geomembrane liner would be to install into West Side Park Pond. Also with that, they gave us a cost estimate for design of that. The plan is to have a change order associated with the cost of the geomembrane, as well as an amendment to their contract with the city. And I requested to hear from them what the credits to the city would be, because I am personally not comfortable asking for a change order for work that's already been part of a previous contract that's been completed. So for example, taking down current rock that's there, or monster block that's there, we've paid for that. So that has not been responded to. However, they did request a meeting with them. So we're all going to get together and meet, and I expect that's what we're going to talk about. That's scheduled for the 18th. So once we have a recommendation, we'll bring it forward, and the commission certainly can, move forward with that, or decide not to move forward with that, and we can discuss how we should discuss the next steps if you do not decide to move forward with whatever final recommendations are. So I am continuing to step forward with that. I realize that it's painstaking, and it would seem like we'd want to get that work done as soon as possible, and we do. I just want to make sure we're not going to do anything that's going to be cost ineffective or paid for 2 times. I mean, to me, that's not what we should do, and I think we should make sure we're getting only the project that we expect, understanding that the liner may be different, as Ross has mentioned, than the existing treatment in the pond, but we want to go through that with a fine-tooth comb, and Stockwell, I know, does as well, along with Geotech and the contractor, who is LTD. So if people have questions about that, I'm happy to answer them, and I'm happy to talk to you individually as well.
Amy, do we have any sense of a timeline still on this project? I'm assuming we're probably not going to be getting this wrapped up this season yet.
Well, we were under the understanding that if the change order were approved and the amendment for the design were approved, that work would begin early October. So there's a possibility that that could come forward at your next meeting, possible. Of course, weather is a factor as it gets colder. However, I'm not sure we're going to be on the same page, I guess, to put it real kindly, when it comes to the actual, what's going to actually be involved. And it may be a situation where we need to hit a pause button to let that work itself out between, maybe not even between just us, but maybe even an additional party. We don't know yet. Other questions on the pond? Okay.
I had a quick question
Yes.
on the pond. Could you explain, like, the artesian well and what has been going on with that? I know that's separate from the pond, but could you explain a little bit of that? I'm just trying to understand.
I probably can explain it. I certainly wish Kyle were here, and maybe Adam can help me a little bit, because they did explain it to me. The well driller was here. I believe they need another casing. Is that correct, Adam?
Is this on?
Yep.
So the well driller was here, and if you've noticed at the park, they put basically a wellhead on top of the existing well. They need to come back and drill out the existing well. I can't remember the exact depths, but the original well was something like 600 feet deep, and they can only go down 560 feet. So there's like 40 feet of material in the bottom of the well, and they're going to try to clean that out the best they can, put a new point down in the bottom, and hopefully make it possible to, if it doesn't start flowing on its own again, to pump out of that. So they need to return and clean out the existing well, put a new casing down to a certain depth, and hopefully it works out well, and it works. So.
Good enough? Okay. Other questions on West Side Park pond or well? Okay, 2 more quick things. We received notice from the Land Water Conservation Fund that we are recommended to receive $34,000 in grant funding from the National Park Service for the resurfacing of the tennis courts in West Side Park for pickleball. That still has to go through the National Park Service at the federal level, so that probably can't get done, completed in time for us to get it done, constructed this fall. It's possible, maybe not. Just with our experience, they tend to move a little bit slower, but being recommended by the state, we've never not gotten one of our grants after being recommended. So we feel really good about that. Remember, we do have the $10,000 as well from Avera, so about $45,000 coming there for that project in grant funds. Last thing, I promise, unless there's questions, we have our plows out to the schools to be painted for Paint the Plows because they might have to be used in the next couple months. Sorry, but that could be. So those are out, and so look forward to seeing that program again. Mayor, that's all I had for the commissioners. If anyone has questions from me, I'm happy to answer them.
Well, I love the painting of the plows, and I think that's a great project for our elementary schools to work on it. I just cringed up here because I'm thinking about what we have to have on the ground to use them. So hopefully they stay really nice and pretty painted this year because they won't have to be used much. I know we need the moisture, but any questions of the city manager? All right, seeing no microphones come on, we will move on to number 6 under routine business is time for a public appearance. This is the time and the place for anybody in the public that wants to address the commission on something not on the agenda tonight. All right, seeing no movement, you can tell I'm used to my online meetings. 7 seconds, right? I don't know if that's the in-person time too or not, but all right. Then we will move on to the consent agenda items. Number 1 is setting the date of September 25th, 2023 at 6 p.m. here in the commission chambers for our next work session of the City Commission. As City Manager Leon shared earlier, that topic will be video lottery licensing. Number 2 is to establish September 25th, 2023 as the date for a public hearing on the request for a special events malt beverage on sale retailer's license for 1 day, October 20th, 2023 from Yankton Area Arts, Rose Hauger, Executive Director at 508 Douglas Avenue for an event at the Meridian Venue, 101 East 3rd Street. Number 3 is to establish September 25th, 2023 as the date for a public hearing on the request for a special events on sale liquor license for 1 day, November 4th, 2023 from Stripes, Inc., doing business as Mojo's 3rd Street at 106 East 3rd Street for an event at the Meridian Venue located at 101 East 3rd Street. Number 4 is to establish September 25th, 2023 as the date for a public hearing on the request for a special events retail on-sale liquor license for 1 day, December 1st, 2023 from Stripes, Inc., doing business as Mojo's 3rd Street at 106 East 3rd Street for an event at the Meridian Venue located at 101 East 3rd Street. Number 5 is to establish September 25th, 2023 as the date for a public hearing on the request for a special events malt beverage on-sale retailer's license and a special on-sale wine retailer's license for 1 day, October 6th, 2023 from the Center, Chris Thury, Executive Director, located at 900 Whiting Drive. Number 6 is to establish September 25th, 2023 as the date for a public hearing on the request for a special events malt beverage on-sale retailer's license and a special on-sale wine retailer's license for 1 day, December 31st, 2023 from the Center. Chris Thury, again, Executive Director, located at 900 Whiting Drive. And number 7 is consideration of memorandum 23-175, recommending approval of the application from Backyard Butchers to sell USDA inspected frozen and prepackaged steaks via a freezer truck in the parking lot of the Tractor Supply located at 2908 Broadway Avenue for the dates of September 15th through October 15th. What is your pleasure?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second on the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Anybody abstaining? All right, consent agenda passes. Number 3, we will move on to old business. So number 1 under old business is a second reading and public hearing of ordinance 1074, an ordinance to appropriate monies for defraying the necessary expenses and liabilities of the city of Yankton, South Dakota for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2024 and ending December 31st, 2024, and providing for the levy of annual taxes for all funds created by ordinance within said city. Before I ask what the pleasure of the commission is, I would ask City Manager Leon to walk us through some of the changes she had discussed during her update and anything else that we need to know.
Thank you, Mayor. I did email these to you, but just wanted to let you all know if you want to pull up your budget or take a look at it. We are proposing that we change cemetery from a 600 series to a 200 series, from 621 to 206. There's no change in the revenues or expenditures, just a change in accounting. The golf improvements and extensions page, we're correcting a formula there for the line item course improvements to show $10,000 there, but there is no change in the expenditure. In the police goal sheet, you have goal sheets before each department. We found an error in the number of DARE officers. It indicates that we have 8 DARE officers that teach DARE. We do not. We have 4, so proposing that change. Correcting an account number in Parks Capital from 504, 545, 320, which was the West Side Park Sundial, to 503, 545, 321. So that change as well. And then updating the budget letter to accurately reflect the increase in solid waste rates. The listed rate increase and stated increase are not currently necessary. So there is just the surcharge, not the actual rate. So I didn't hear commissioners from anyone else about any other errors, clerical or otherwise. There may be some, but those are the ones we caught as we comb through it further. Of course, you all can make changes to the actual budget, or if you have found something else in error, we can certainly make those edits as well. I believe, too, there are 2 actions to take on this, the actual budget and then the resolution associated with it.
Correct. So technically, yes, we're on 1A under old business. Are there any other questions for the city manager, any pertaining to changes she made that she sent out earlier, or any other questions as it relates to the first part of this? Oops.
I do have a quick comment still. So on the August 14, that work session for the budget, the e-packet is still just the agenda. Is there a way to link that?
Yes, we made note of that. What we wanted to do is put the correct version on after approved. So
Okay.
Jean's ready to do that after you guys
Get it
act.
finally. Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, what is the pleasure of the commission as tied to 1A? Oh, I was going to get a motion first and then open it up, if that's all right. Is that okay? Okay, perfect. That way we'll know what we're commenting on. What is the pleasure of the commission?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the ordinance 1074 that we just discussed. Is there any commission discussion now that we have a motion and a second? All right. Anybody in the public want to make a comment? If you want to go ahead and state your name, and then feel free to take the podium.
Roberta Amber, I live at 701 West Riverside Drive. A couple comments on the budget. First off, I appreciated Commissioner Villanueva for asking that the budget be posted, and I'm a little frustrated that, to be very honest, it wasn't posted in its original form, so those of us in the public could actually go out and take a look at it before the final budget was made. So I would encourage you next year to try to do it at the time of the working session, and then each time it's brought to the commission, you can then repost whatever that current budget is. So that's just one comment. Another comment on outside agencies, and I think it's on page 106. One line item is Yankton Thrive for $460,000. I don't quite understand how Yankton Thrive and the City Commission work together. I do know the city manager is on both boards, and I do know that there's several commissioners on both. And I think, Bridget, I think you're on, and I think Mayor Mosier, you're on. But I do think that with Thrive, anytime an organization is giving approximately $500,000, I would hope each of you have gone in and asked for their budget, looked at their budget, and questioned what their budget is. If you haven't, you have no idea how much money they're sitting on for contingencies or anything else. $500,000 is a lot of money. I would just make sure that you're doing your due diligence to make sure it should be that. Maybe it should be less, and maybe it should be more. I don't know. But I would hope that would be something you would look at. And my last thing I wanted to talk about is kind of near and dear to my heart, just as a retired person, and that is that I've gotten into pickleball. And I think if you look as a community, there's a lot of us that play pickleball now. Now, I had the unfortunate circumstances on January 4th I was playing in City Hall and I fell and I broke my arm, but it's now repaired. And so, for those of you that don't play pickleball, I know you're working on some stuff at Westside Park, and I appreciate that. That's an outdoor court, and in South Dakota, it's tough outdoor courts, of course, with our weather situation. I also know that on Faneuil's Memorial Park, you included lines on the tennis court, which is wonderful, except the height of the tennis court net is not the same height as the pickleball court should actually be. It's a place to play, but it's certainly not regulation. And also at the summit, you added a few more courts, a couple courts, which I think you'll find if you look at the people that attend, and we all sign up, that it's well attended, but one of the courts has a basketball hoop by it that you have to work around. And I would encourage, I don't know where it is in the budget. I don't know what you've put in the budget for pickleball courts, but I think there's a group of individuals that are probably use it more than tennis. I'm not saying you should not support tennis, but I think this is a growing sport that they should take a look at and what you can sport. I like playing at City Hall, but I would encourage you to look at that floor. There's a ton of dead spots, and it's getting worse and worse. So just please consider this in your budget deliberations. Thank you.
Before you step back, how many pickleballers, what's picklers, what's the technical term? I don't know. How many are roughly playing? You know, I know it's growing, and I see lots of people, but do you have any idea, ballpark, the number of participants?
I don't have any idea on any of that, but I do know that we all utilize the same scheduling software, and you can see who's in there.
Okay.
So you could probably get an idea from that.
I'm with you on that, Roberta. I did pickleball and thinking I could pick it up and it won't make me sweat. It'll be a nice leisurely activity, and oofta, there came out my Scandinavian. It's a fun sport, but I too am on that pickleball scheduler app, and it's really busy.
So just so the commission knows as well, when we do post the budget online, in the budget section, that has to be presented to you. So you get it in your SharePoint, but at that same time, we do post it online. And it is linked back to that link online when it is on the agenda. We'll put it in the work session folder as well, and we'll try to put it some places where it's more obvious for folks to see it. But it's available online at the same time, the same day you all get it, which is usually the last couple days of July. So it is there. It's also, there's a hard copy if you don't use the internet. There's a hard copy at the library and at City Hall, and we'll certainly make folks a copy too. So it's available if anyone wants to comb through it or look at it or has any questions. It's or wants to sit down and talk with me. We can do that. We can do that too.
Any other, anybody else in the public on this section? Yep. If you could state your name prior to.
My name's Matt Evans. On the subject of pickleball, I just thought thought it was ironic. I have a lot of statistics on that. We're trying to do pickleball inside the mall right now, or Event Central. Registered playtime schedulers like 190 right now for members. I have like all of the courts, when they're open, and like prices and stuff like that if anybody's ever interested. But we're trying to get some indoor courts. A lot of people are interested in evening play, which isn't really available right now. There's a lot of daytime and stuff like that. It's, I think they said, the fastest growing sport right now. So just thought I'd put that out there. There's a lot of people who are interested and who have reached out, who want this in the community.
Matt, quick question. Do you know if would that be like a tournament situation? Like, is it big enough to have like tournaments?
Oh yeah. There's a lot of stuff here. So I talked to, do you know Marilyn Wilson? So pretty big advocate of this whole thing. I think we could get a lot of community support on it. With the theory of build it and they will come. I mean, if you build it nice enough, I would see this number doubling very fast. It's the same thing with keep doing the outdoor ones and whatever. But mathematically, there are more winter months in South Dakota than there are summer. So if we can get some more indoor courts with evening play, whether it's more time at the summit or the city or whatever, there's a ton of people who've been asking, just me, which most people don't know me, for it in Event Central. So I can see if the city wanted to do something indoors or whatever, that it would succeed. And I think it would be good for something in the budget.
Great. Yeah, thank you for that. Marilyn, I know, has been here and addressed the city commission before, and she's the one that taught me how to play. So she's very patient if anybody wants to learn. Any other questions or comments from the public? We have a motion and a second on 1A. Al, roll call.
Hunoff.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Minor.
Aye.
Schramm.
Aye.
Villanueva.
Aye.
Weber.
Aye.
Benson.
Aye.
Brunig.
Aye.
Mayor Mosher.
Aye. That part of the motion, or that motion carries. And now we'll move on to Part B, which is consideration of Resolution 23-48, adopting the 2024 fiscal year budget and directing the city manager to administer the budget as required by state law. What is your pleasure?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Anything to add here? Amy, from you or anybody? Okay. Any commissioner questions? Anybody in the public? Roll call.
Johnson.
Aye.
Minor.
Aye.
Schramm.
Aye.
Villanueva.
Aye.
Weber.
Aye.
Benson.
Aye.
Brunig.
Aye.
Hunoff.
Aye.
Mayor Mosher.
Aye, motion carries. Number 2 under old business is Memorandum 23-176, reviewing development incentives and development processes. Amy, I'm going to turn it over to you to walk us through, start with walking us through the memo. I know we had a work session to update the commissioners 2 weeks ago at our regular meeting, and I know this was an extension of that, so I'll start with you.
Yes, so you still have associated with my memo, Dave's memo, regarding the different tools that are available for economic development incentives. And as this conversation started, we still have an individual who is requesting an incentive for an economic development project, who is an entrepreneur who would like the commission to consider an incentive for that project. Now, we've taken the conversation a little bit in a different direction, and that's okay. It's your purview as commissioners. I just want to make sure that we as staff have enough direction to know a few things as we come out of this discussion, one of them being, you know, are we moving forward with that discussion? And I think through some of the questions that I ask of you here in the memo, we'll get there. But I don't want to leave that person without an understanding of where they stand for their projects. So that's still standing out there. I did ask you all about some of the things we talked about. It sounds like just from the individual conversations, there are some commissioners who are not interested in seeing anything change. There's a commissioner who may not be certain, and there may be a commissioner who is very certain they want to see a lot change, and there may be degrees of that. So that's for you all to talk through, and I think you'll have some community input as well, and you'll hear from them. The questions that I have for you, many are the same, and some have changed slightly. But again, I'm wondering if you would like to change or expand any of those existing economic development incentives. We have to stay within the confines of law, obviously, but are we changing anything? We went through the work session, but we also had 2 economic development projects then in your regular session. So we have things that will be coming forward to you, and so we don't want to give misinformation to people. Or if we're changing gears, we want to make sure everyone's on the same plane. Do you want to continue using the ones we have, or are there some you want to discontinue? Should any of the should we create or try to develop some new economic incentive programs for specific types of either commercial or industrial or retail use, or certain areas, as you have done with the facade grant program? So asking that. Should we continue with that confidential process involved in property development, or should there be some more public process involved in that? And I'm sure there'll be some discussion about that this evening. Are we doing some background checks on people, finding out information about the individuals themselves that have given us development proposals? And if so, what does that look like? So as your conversation gets going here, staff may put you on pause and ask you more clarifying questions. Land appraisals, is that something that you want to include in the process of development? So making sure we have a land appraisal for any city-owned property. Is there a 2-meeting public hearing process that you want to use for those projects that are seeking to develop on city-owned property? And if so, is that public hearing, are we using that word, public hearing, in its legal sense that makes a difference to us as staff on what we're doing? Because there's publication things and various time periods between which we have to let sit before we can have this first and second hearing. So that has some implications as well. So as you get into that discussion, we'll be asking you some clarifying questions there as well. If a new process or a policy is approved, should the developer or the prospect apply to a staff involvement in that project when it's not city-owned land? So, we are connected with Thrive as well. Sometimes Thrive has a project, but they want a TID, for example, the development prospect. So do those things apply, or is it just city land? Again, clarifying questions that we'll want to hear and want to be certain on, so we're following your direction. And then the question, concerned with economic development, are these tools themselves needing to be changed? And if so, how should we change them? Or is there concern about the specific projects they're being used on, or the developer they're being used with? In my mind, those are kind of different conversations than just the tools. If it's the actual project and the actual developer, then that should maybe be a different discussion had. So I'm certainly, wherever you guys want to 5 of you want to take it is where we're taking it. I may kind of ask you some challenging questions as you go through your conversation, because we got to be clear and we got to know what we're doing, and we got to treat everyone according to the process set forward. Ross has some legal items he may need to bring up, and Dave Mingo will probably need to help press the gas or pump the brake here as we talk, as he knows some things about economic development that we don't, because he deals with the prospects every day. I did have some emails, conversations with some first-class cities you have in your packet that I put in the public packet. And these are not, these are not studies by any sense of the imagination. This is me emailing out and saying, hey, what do you guys do? Varying degrees on what cities do, and all cities say all projects are unique, and that's true. It appears to me Mitchell relies more heavily on their economic development authority, their Thrive. They don't call it Thrive. I don't know if they call it their corn. I don't know what they call it, but they rely more heavily on that entity to take on more of the economic development negotiating and processes. Spearfish maybe relies a little more heavily on them. That's something that's an option to you if that's what you so choose to do. The input there, though, then could be that it's whether or not the land is transferred. It still could be limited what is shared. So that's just a consideration. Other cities tend to do things more like us. In talking with Vermillion, they have very little land that's owned by the city. So some cities just don't own land in the same way that Yankton has in its history. So lots of different models. I wouldn't say there's one hard and true, but we can talk about that as well. We also can talk about what we found out talking with the city of Sioux Falls, what we found out about appraisals and second readings. So as you hear from the public, as you have your discussion, you can ask us what we've heard back and what our thoughts are, or our opinions or recommendations if you want them. So with that, Mayor, I'll let you see if you have a motion or see if you want to start out with some discussion, and we'll do our best here to get the notes correct.
Thank you for that. Thank you for walking us through that. I know, as Amy said, there's always lots to discuss when it comes to economic development, and it's never one size fits all, I guess, as you look at that and you look across. I, too, had a discussion with several mayors in those communities as well to just kind of see their thoughts and what they had to say. So I can provide some of that too. As Amy said, not surprising. The mayors are similar in what they shared as far as city managers and how they work together on economic development. And so I didn't find out a whole lot different than probably what Amy has, but some thoughts there. So I know that, like we said, we had we discussed this during our work session, and I know, I think Dave had to cut 3 hours of discussion off, everything to be shared there, because there's a lot to go through and a lot to pick through, as he said. Sometimes we have different businesses that can get different incentives. So while we may have, I've been saying DeWalt, I don't know if we have a DeWalt tool set, but if we do, it's a pretty starter kit on the number of tools we have in that toolkit to use. And just like you have a toolkit, you can't use a hammer to screw, maybe somebody does. Mike, I feel like you're industrial enough to use a hammer to screw in a nail or something, but I couldn't do that. So I know not every tool fits every opportunity that we have as well. So, so there's a lot going on there. So I don't know where we want to start. If there's other commissioners who have thoughts or discussion items as we move forward on this.
Mayor Mosier, I have 3 things I'd like to touch on from the list that the city manager had. The first item is a public hearing process that gives the public a better opportunity to give input before a project is formally approved by the commission. It appears, for instance, that Paradigm deal was discussed by the commission for months in executive session, but the public received very little notice before the commission officially approved it. And, I think it's important to keep the public informed. You can see all the questions we've had in the past year. Those questions really didn't get a chance to be asked before the deal was made. And you can negotiate confidentially, but like I say, the public should get a fair chance to weigh in. If it's a good deal that makes common sense, people will support it. But any deal built with public funds should be able to withstand some public scrutiny. So with that in mind, I'd like to make a motion. After city officials and buyer agree to terms on an incentivized land transaction, first and second public hearings will be scheduled to give citizens opportunities to ask questions about it.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second to have, is it just land sales, Commissioner Hanoff?
Incentivized land transactions.
Okay. Incentivized land transactions at 2 public hearings. Being that we have a motion and a second, I would open it up for commission discussion and thoughts.
May I ask some clarifying questions, Mayor?
Absolutely.
So Commissioner Hunhoff, are you utilizing the vernacular of public hearing, and I'm just trying to be clear, coming from a place of understanding, where we're setting a public hearing as we do, waiting at least 10 days, publishing the public hearing, and going through that same format as we do, for example, a zoning change or an alcohol license?
I wouldn't be opposed to publishing that, but I think the most important thing is to have it on the agenda so the public has a 2-week period between meetings to come and voice their opinion.
So you want a 14-day period between the meetings?
Most public hearings that we have now, you'll have the first reading, that's the first hearing, and then the second reading before action is taken. That's generally when most of the public gives their input. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I think, 10 days, so we usually use the 2-week period cycle, I think.
Different ordinances require different publication timing.
So
what I'm hearing
days.
is two meetings, essentially.
Okay. Yep. So have to be 14 days in between, without the ability for a special meeting. When we're all gone and retired, what I'm thinking that could happen is somebody could say, let's have this public hearing, and then on Monday, and then on Wednesday, let's call a special meeting. And I don't think that's what you want, so.
Well, the motion doesn't specifically say 2 weeks. That's what I had anticipated would be the norm in most cases, but if the commission wanted to schedule a special meeting and have that second public hearing in 10 days, the motion doesn't forbid that either.
Okay, what I'm thinking is we should draft, if this passes, we should draft some type of resolution for you all to look at. So knowing that, we can craft that language into the resolution or ordinance or whatever. I suppose it'll be a resolution. We can craft that into that.
Other questions? Clarification questions from you? Amy?
Not right now. As people discuss, I may have more, so
Okay.
thank you.
Yep.
I have one question, just for staff clarification. What would be considered incentivized? So, and I know an answer on the surface might be anything less than appraised value would be considered incentivized, but we've also had instances where appraised values were contested. So, what if that happened then? Do you need multiple appraisals, or how does that, what's the definition of incentivized, I guess?
The transactions we've been talking about all along is we've had this process over the last 3 meetings where we sell taxpayer-owned city property at less than market value.
So in that instance, then, what would be the definition of market value? Because we have made some sales at at comp values, like the Frito-Lay project was a sale at comp values. So that a sale like that wouldn't be included in consideration.
Yeah, if you don't feel that they're getting any kind of an incentivized, benefit from this, I wouldn't think that would require a 2-hearing process. It wouldn't hurt, though.
And then what all is included in consideration for incentivization? Is it just the land sale price, or is it whether or not it was benefited from being included in a tax increment district previously? We'd need to be real specific about that too in the eventual resolution that would be created.
Well, the sale price is obviously, I think, what I'm talking about, and most people would assume that wouldn't be the case. The incentivized land transaction involves the percentage they're paying of the actual value, something I know a subsequent motion I'd like to address.
I think the reason I ask these questions, and if the motion gets approved, we'll have to have further clarification and over a couple meetings' time, is, the Paradigm Project was used as an example, but if you consider that it made a grant available for infrastructure and that the owner also waived the discretionary formula, those amounts could also be added to the price paid for the property in one way of thinking. So we'd have to be real specific about how we defined incentivized.
Defining incentivized then gets to be extremely cumbersome and complicated because there's very few projects are. I'm sorry. Thank you. I was sitting too far away from the mic. Defining incentivized then gets to be very complicated and cumbersome because it's hard to define something that is so unique on a case-by-case scenario. Legally, Ross, I think you'd have to have a long, convoluted definition that is hard to peg.
Definitions are why lawyers exist sometimes. I think the reality here is I think if you're looking for an approach that allows for input of the public, it's almost easier to define when you wouldn't need it than when you would. I think it's almost easier just to assume that transfers of real property would require 2 hearings, just like there are exceptions where every once in a while there's a license that we approve for, like special events might not require a second, but it's easier to just have one process. You know what I mean? I think that might address this issue from a staff perspective. It's just far easier to navigate.
I question why we would limit this to only land sales. Why not apply it to sales tax rebates, tax increment districts, facade grants, all of our economic development tools?
Go ahead.
Could I comment?
Yeah, usually I wait for public after the commission, but this is probably going to tie into what we think about, so.
Right. I think as far as incentivized sale, I think.
Could you state your name? Sorry.
Oh,
Just your name is fine.
Jim Means,
Thank you.
701 West Riverside Drive. I think the incentivized sale simply is you decide it is. All along, with Paradigm, you always called it an incentivized sale. If you guys say it's an incentivized sales, it is one. If you say it's not, it's not. 5 of you get to decide. But the thing is, I think on that very subject, why does every sale go through Thrive? Why would Elkhorn Valley Bank go through Thrive? Why wouldn't it just go through a normal channels? There wasn't a need. We knew who the people were. Why does that have to go through Thrive? And be able to do it at one meeting? I think unless there's a need for it, I'm not against incentivizing businesses. Matter of fact, I'm all for it. You gave Matt, which I think was great, to give him the tax break on things. I think in giving somebody a cut in the price of a land, I'm all for it. And if that's what you do, it's an incentivized sale. And then let the public know you're doing it instead of having them find out afterwards. That shouldn't be that big a deal. Have it at 2 meetings. And if there's 5 or 6 days in between, as long as it has time to get in the paper and somebody can ask a question of one of their city commissioners about it and find out about it, instead of having it be done the first time you see it when you open up the paper in the morning, it's over with, and nobody in the public even knew what was going on because you're doing this in executive sessions. I mean, it just, all you have to do is decide if it is or not. And of course, if 4 of you think it isn't and 5 of you think it is, well, maybe you ought to think twice about how we're going to do this. I mean, but I think normally you guys pretty much agree on stuff. It shouldn't be that hard to agree and let people know. And as far as appraisal, you know, I traded cars, and the first thing I did before I even went to the car lot was Googled Consumer Report and say, well, what's my car worth? Gave them the mileage and the year and the model, and figured, well, what am I going to get for a trade? And I didn't get that much, you know, but at least I had something to shoot at. I had some idea. You don't know how good of incentive you're giving somebody if you don't have an idea what it's worth. And Dave mentioned that the appraisals, I mean, not getting the appraised price. I mean, I looked at mine, I thought, oh, God, that'd be great if I get that on my car. Well, I didn't. You know, it was, you know, Consumer Report must think of places other than South Dakota more than South Dakota. But I still think you have something, an idea of how big of an appraisal or how big of a discount you're getting. Here in this last few months, you sold property in the same area, right in the same area, for $25,000 an acre, $50,000 an acre, $66,000 an acre, all same street. The one you sold for $25,000 an acre, I would say arguably is the best piece of property out of it. And Culver's right across the street to the south, at least one appraiser, the county appraiser, has it appraised the Culver's land, not the building, the land, at about $110,000 an acre is what they think it's worth. And usually the assessed value is 10, 15, 20% below market value. So, I mean, you guys should just at least have a rough idea of how much incentive you're giving to people, instead of just somebody, 25,000, that sounds good to me. I mean, 50,000, yeah, that's fair. Well, 66,000 across the street, why not? You know, I mean, somehow you guys should have some idea of why you're doing what you're doing, instead of just, oh, 25,000, why not? 50,000, that sounds good. 66,000, that's even better, you know. An appraisal for, I noticed in the minutes, the last one you did, it was $4,000. In that little area, you just sold how many hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of land, and getting an appraisal someplace in there for $4,000, would that have screwed the deal? I don't think so. I mean, I'm trading cars for a car that that's not even an expensive car, and I at least look to see what kind of a going rate is. That's not too much to ask for our commissioners to do.
So if I may add a little additional information. So all city commission agendas are available before the meeting, typically the Friday before. So yeah, the action takes place on Monday. Having 2 meetings, the commission should be aware, would put Yankton at a competitive disadvantage with other communities, because most other communities move faster than that. I can think of 2 projects, and I can state them because they're public after the fact, the UPS and the Schwann's project, where we were talking with businesses that had explicit instruction to keep things confidential because they were moving to Yankton. And the UPS project, for example, if Vermillion would have known that they were thinking about moving their distribution center here, they would have probably ran to UPS in between our meetings and tried to incent them as much as possible to go back to Vermillion. So that could be a significant impact. And the other thing is and the discussion is very correct in that we want to be transparent, but the city government does function in a private way at times with business dealings. And if a business is looking at Yankton and say it's a a restaurant, whatever, and another business is interested in purchasing city-owned land that, and we get, after the first hearing, there might be existing businesses that come to the second meeting, and even though we might have a retail leakage in that sector, would dramatically or emphatically express their displeasure with having new competition move to town. So I understand that's the commission's job to work through those issues, but there's just other things that need to be considered with a time delay.
Correct. And Ross, do you want to address the Thrive question? Because I do see somebody making their way to the podium.
Yeah, there's some confusion on that issue, I think, out there. The reality is there is express procedures that must be followed if the city is selling directly to the consumer, not through its designated economic development corporation. And that changes dramatically what the city can and can't do. So if there is a goal by this commission, if it's policy driven, you guys want to control and shape and have some say in what goes on a particular location, then that's the way it has to go, unless you just want to sell each parcel to the highest bidder every time. And that is the tug of war. And if you want as a commission to be able to stop things from going places, or to say, no, that thing should go over here and we have the right land for that, this is the process we have to utilize. So that's why it's the tool that you guys get to leverage to have some say. If you give up going through Thrive, it looks drastically different and you have far less control.
Ross, if you don't go through Thrive, does that then require 3 appraisers to evaluate the property?
I think Dave is probably...
There's multiple ways. There can be the 3 freeholders process that you're describing as described in SDCL. You can have a formal commercial appraiser also establish a value. And then there's also a brokerage listing process that that's what Sioux Falls is doing because they have their own listing agent, licensed listing agent, or on staff. So they're going through that process that way. We've used listing agreements in the past with multiple listing services. So yeah, there's multiple other ways to sell property. They all take significantly longer than economic development projects typically function.
Dave, it might also be helpful for the commission if you explain how your office backs into or works up what you understand market to be. I understand that at pretty much any given time, your office and staff understand what market is. How do you come up with that?
This is going to sound really cliche, but the market is what the market is at any given point in time on any given piece of property. And so, yes, when I'm providing and we're providing information to the commission for those considerations in executive session, we obviously try and list a number of comps around the community. In a community like this, and I imagine it's the same in other places, it's very difficult to ever really have a true comp. And like I say, we've had appraisals that have missed the mark both directions also, but they're produced by licensed appraisers and are generally, pretty reliable. Appraisals take 4 to 8 weeks to get, so there's another factor in considering that aspect. But
Well, we're not talking about appraisals yet specifically. We have the motion here about the first and second hearings for the public. I feel like some of the comments have been trying to make this a very complicated motion, but to me it's pretty simple. It's just a matter of giving the public a decent chance to weigh in. You said, you got to be able to move fast, but you'll spend months, at the city commission talking about these deals. You're not even giving the public a couple of days at most.
I just want to add, as far as giving the public notice, not only does the city commission packet come out on the Friday before our meetings, but it is standard practice for our city manager and our mayor to sit down with our local media outlets on Friday morning and go through the entire agenda, allow them to ask questions, And with the Paradigm Project in particular, there was media coverage of that project before the meeting. So to accuse us of trying to hide things from the public, I think is very unfair, because is there any other local government that meets with the media before their meetings and goes through the agenda? To me, that is a sign that we are trying to be transparent. We are trying to make people aware of what's on our agenda. But I go back to, if we're going to apply this 2-meeting rule to land sales, why wouldn't we apply it to all of our economic development toolbox?
I don't get a lot of complaints about things like facade grants, but I've had a ton of public input about incentivized land sales, and so that's the issue I'm trying to address.
I guess I'd be in favor of the 2 meetings. I don't necessarily know that it has to be incentivized land sales. I think it could just be land sales. I think if it's good enough for incentivized land sales, I think it could be just fine for just land sales in general. I think as soon as we start getting into incentivized, we start picking and choosing, and that becomes a difficult thing to do. So I guess I would be in favor of not picking and choosing, but just having something that can cover everything across the board, so that we're not picking and choosing, and we're not dealing with the debate of whether or not something is incentivized or isn't.
I agree with that, and I would be glad to amend my motion to remove the word incentivize and just talk about land transactions.
I think Commissioner Johnson, you had the second. Are you in favor of, or I think does he have to match the second, or do we just vote on? Yeah, we need a second to the amendment, sorry.
Well, then I'll second it.
I'd like to throw one more curveball at you guys.
Okay.
Land transactions, property rights generally. Leases? Options, rights of first refusal.
I think now's a good time to also mention, we received correspondence from someone that is currently looking at doing a project in Yankton. It's the Elkhorn Valley Bank project. And so Lynn Peterson is in the audience tonight. He shared with us that if we were to approve this proposal or any of the other proposals that have been proposed, that he would seriously consider not building a $7 million project in Yankton. Lynn, I don't know if you want to address that with.
I appreciate that, but Matt has been at the podium.
Oh, sorry.
So if I can take back control and please be acknowledged when you're speaking, I would appreciate that. Matt is giving up his spot. All right. State your name if you would, please.
Lynn Peterson, 805 Riley Way, and I don't think I said 7 million, did I?
7 figure is what I meant to say, sorry.
We'll take 7 million.
This is how you really get in a lot of trouble.
Strike that from the record.
Yeah, I did. The process, I don't want everybody to forget that economic development is a fast-moving animal, very fast. It takes almost nothing to trip it up and for people to hit the road. Putting requirements like these, I would first ask, and I think I know, I've talked to some of the Watertowns and Mitchells and different people, and I asked them, do you guys have the background checks and appraisals and all of the like? And the answer is simply no. And that's what we're going to be competing against. I just don't want anybody to forget that. Honestly, I'll be completely honest, I was put at a little bit of a disadvantage, I felt. I could work through it and get through it. As Dave Mingo stated last week, or the last work study, a lot of companies really demand not secretive, that's not the right word, but they demand the privacy that an LLC or some other shell corp can make, so that they know that they can come in, get something done without alerting the entire world of who's coming in, and their competition then comes in on them. And I was forced to show who I am, which I have no problem with that, but it really does put me at a disadvantage now with potentially with the first right of refusal holder on what they want to do. And so, I mean, you understand and see how that can work and can't. Again, we can work through it, and I have no problem with that. But that's my biggest issue is, where do you start and stop on background checks? Who verifies this is acceptable or this isn't? If somebody had a misdemeanor in 1995, does that exclude them? I think honestly it can open up a world of liability to potentially create more harm than good. I get the intention. I don't disagree with the intention of it. I just think in the end it would really pose some potential problems and liabilities. So that's the only reason I wanted to just share that, and I feel that, and I hear that a lot also in the public as well. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you.
Matt.
Okay. Well, I'll try and sum this up really quick. There's a lot to talk about here. He's completely right. There's companies, national contracts, or whatever it is, big stores that everybody wants here that you either can't or won't explain who they are, and you don't want to do it, and you can't do it. And to bring these places in, there has to be that level of privacy, bottom line. Otherwise, these projects won't come. Like with appraisals, Mason, would you agree? I think Mason's probably got a lot of experience here. Would you like to kick in a little bit on this? Maybe not. If you don't, I understand. I think he probably knows more than most on this, maybe not. I deal a lot with appraisals. Appraisals are a piece of paper, in my opinion. I've seen them change $1 million between two different ones. I've seen people get hurt big time on appraisals. I think, is it Ben? I agree. I feel in a way you're listening to Ross. Ross knows a lot about contract law, and just getting rid of it completely as far as appraisals go is probably the smartest thing that you will ever do. I think just leaving it simple and having the 2-week period or whatever it is you guys want, I think that's a great idea. On the next hand, you guys talk about tools. It's not necessarily the tools that you have in your box, but the restrictions you have in your box in order to use tools, okay? The more restrictions you put on this stuff, if it's 2 weeks or whatever it is, that's just one more trip up. That is going to keep these national contracts from coming in. That's going to keep banks like Elkhorn from developing. The less restrictions you have, it's going to bring in more people. And everybody here wants community development. I think that's one thing we can all agree on. So to make it easier, like when I talked at the last meeting, that's the simplest thing that I can say is that is the best way that you guys will help me. That is the best way that you will help Elkhorn. Anybody who comes in here is just to figure out the easiest, best path through there. But I also agree with the public, needing to know. I think that the public was well aware of everything that was going on. I mean, that's an opinion. I like to state facts, but I think there's just, you guys are talking about the same things. The tools that you have is you not putting these restrictions on, whatever they are, to make them easier, like the tax increment, or whether it's the sales tax, like for me, that's to make that so easy for me to come in here, and the community knows about it, and the support that I had coming in, that is what I need. That is the tool that I need. I think it's a tool that most people don't even know, like you guys really don't understand. Maybe you do, I'm not saying you don't, that you have, to use, is just to make it easier for people to do stuff.
I would just echo to what Dave said. As far as losing our competitive advantage, I think is the issue here. It's not trying to be secret or not putting things in public, but I think we need to keep that in mind. I had a mayor just down the street, and I'm not going to tell you which direction, say that they hope this goes through, because then they're going to take everything they can from Yankton, because they'll know what we're doing. So I say that again, but when we talk competitive advantage, and as Matt alluded to, and Lynn, that's sometimes a lot of why we do what we do is so that we can continue to provide those opportunities in Yankton.
On that note, I just want to add, when you look at the rules we're playing by, they are set by the state. So if we're going to change the rules in Yankton and I think put us at a competitive disadvantage, I think we should instead be looking at the state. If this, talk to your legislators, have them change the state statutes so everyone's playing on a level playing field and it's not just Yankton at a disadvantage.
Oh, sorry, Commissioner Villanueva, did you? Oh, okay. Go ahead, if you'd step to the podium and give us your name.
Thank you. Ron Kraft, 1403 Spruce. A little background on where I'm coming from. I came here in 1995 to work for Yankton Area Progressive Growth. Prior to that, I started in 1970 in community development work. I worked in communities in Iowa, Nebraska, Colorado before I came here. I spent 6 years with the Iowa Development Commission. 3.5 of those years were as the director of the industrial division, where our job and our team was putting companies together with communities, because communities close the deal. States don't close deals, communities close deals. So there's a whole process that people talk about on a national level when they sit around and talk about economic development. And, not every project is worthy of a lot of incentives, and others are. That also is timing. I think back when we had Alf's close in Yankton in November, and Gurney's closed 6 months later. There was 100 employees, 90 to 100 at Alf's, 134 full-time people, plus probably 300 or 400 seasonal people at Gurney's. At that point, I think the city commissioners would have given the sun, moon, and the stars to have employers that could replace that. So these things keep shifting and changing. There's no cookie cutter, folks. Every project is unique, but timing is important. I heard Dave say this at the work session last week, and that is, it's a negative process. We're all proud of our communities, but the fact of the matter is, almost any one of these businesses has choices that they could make the same amount of money, whether they did it in North Cornstalk, Nebraska, or they did it in Yankton, or they did it in Brookings, wherever. But confidentiality oftentimes gets to be a big deal. One particular case I know where right after a project was announced, and I was talking to the company vice president of real estate, and he says, Ron, do you know I have had 140 contacts within the last, and I think it was 3 or 4 weeks. They were engineers, they were architects, they were contractors, they were vendors of machinery and everything else. They were people who were looking for management jobs. I was just deluged with people that wanted to have contact with our company so that they, it was a big disruption, no matter how you cut it. So timing is important. you know, the city of Yankton, I think, needs a lot of kudos. You had an opportunity here that you did a marvelous job with. 1990-ish, you had the opportunity to buy a section of land from the state of South Dakota. That became the Fox Run development. You know, there aren't a lot of city commissions that would have had the entrepreneurial wherewithal, or the guts, frankly, to have taken on a project like that, but the city did a marvelous job with it. You know, the whole development, if a private company would have done that, you'd have seen strip development on Broadway and strip development on 50, and the center of this probably wouldn't be developed yet. You know, so what you've been doing is working, is part of what I'm trying to tell you. It's it's your prerogative to make changes in how you go about it, but please be careful with what you do. I think you've got a good track record, you got a good history. It helps to talk through these things, I know, but, you know, and I spent a couple of years on the city commission filling out a term for Kurt Hauser when he left. And I probably shouldn't even say this, but if you go to a two-meeting hearing, I don't care what the project is, there's going to be somebody who thinks their ox is getting gored, and they're going to be in here trying to tell you why that you shouldn't do this deal. I don't care whether it's retail, I don't care whether it's manufacturing, and they think it's going to compete for jobs. You're opening a can of worms I'm not sure you really want to live with. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
You sat back down. I thought maybe you changed your mind.
I knew Ron would take a minute.
State your name, please.
Dan Speck, 508 Chalkstone Road. I think Brian's proposal on the cuff seems like a real good idea, but it does give us a competitive disadvantage. When I got into real estate 21 years ago, Charlotte Herline, and a lot of you know her or remember her, told me, Dan, you can kill any real estate deal you want to. The trick is to try and put them together. And I think this extended beyond state law requirement notification or discussion would kill some deals. And I can give you 2 examples. Dave brought up the Frito-Lay project. I represented the buyer of that. The buyer would not tell me who they were or what they were doing. Dave knew about that long before I did. And so they wanted the confidentiality, and they insisted on it. Another story that I have, there's a large tract of land in Yankton. I won't say what it is because the person is still alive. But when that tract of land was going to get developed with a large building, the gentleman said it was in the paper, was on the news, so I went and bought the land. And then the people that wanted to build the building had to buy it from me. And that's how I made my money. So it does happen. So I just like you to consider those things as you consider this proposal.
Hi, Nancy Winandy, 1205 Peyton Lane. I have lots of comments to share tonight, but I really want to just hold firm to the motion on the table and my questions here. What is expected to be shared during a public hearing? So what would be required?
The information that the commission acted on a year ago, was it May 8th, I think, 2022? That information, the sale price per acre, or the sale price for the whole 8 acres was $200,000. Heard a lot of public criticism of that, and not even being a fourth of the actual value. So you would hear input that maybe would not be positive, but if it's a good deal that makes sense for both sides, the public will support it.
So are you expecting and requiring the business to disclose their name?
Whatever was, that May 8th, 2022 meeting, I think Paradigm was mentioned.
Well, I'm not talking any project specific. I'm talking about future sales that might happen. Would you require the name to be disclosed during this two-meeting process? I'm trying to clarify the groundwork of what we're laying here to know what the expectation would be through the public hearing process.
The name isn't as important to me as the price, but it does have value, because if it's somebody local who's involved as the buyer, there's not going to be a lot of concern. But if there's somebody they've never heard of, they may want to try to do some research and find out what kind of business history this person has.
So that to me does not sound like a standard requirement then. If you know them and they're local, you don't have to share it. But if you don't know the person, then more details need to be shared?
No, I was saying, I think that's why it is probably important to share it, is so people can do their due diligence and, investigate a little bit and find out if they need to know something they don't know about the buyer.
So if a shell corporation is created to purchase the land, and then it's going to be transferred to a third party after this first sale is made, that would not need to be disclosed then, because the initial buyer purchasing it from the city would need to be the only one who's revealing their identity?
I'm just proposing that we do the same thing we did last year on May 8th, 2022, but then also allow a 2-week period for the public to come to the next meeting and give input. We had a room full of people here a month ago that were frustrated that they didn't have that opportunity. And these are taxpayer dollars we're dealing with. They aren't our dollars.
Absolutely.
And so the public funds should receive public support.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out what the public wants as a part of this public hearing process, to be clear. So if it passes and if we're working with prospects, we are clear with them exactly what would be required of them for a public hearing process. So the other question that I have, or that I just wanted to clarify, is when we talk about land transfers going through Thrive, I just wanted to clarify, Thrive doesn't make any money on these deals. We are a conduit for the transaction allowed by state law. So it makes the transaction financially neutral from the city's position, that you're not hiring a realtor, you're not having to do other steps that might actually cost the city money. I believe that's probably why state law has created this process, and the majority of the communities that I am aware of, many still smaller than us, utilize this process. So it's a good process. And so if we as a community want to talk to our legislators about modifying that process, I would definitely want to be involved in that conversation. And then my last comment on this specific two-meeting process, we talk about the prospects wanting to remain confidential, or the public having input on who comes to Yankton and what they're going to do. I'm going to use Sam and Louise as an example for you tonight. They want to come to Yankton. They have made it clear they want to have someone purchase a franchise here in Yankton and bring their restaurant to our community. They came to us, we posted it on our Facebook page, we have talked to other potential prospects in the community. They also posted it in Yankton. And what kind of a warm welcome did they get from our community? We don't want a restaurant like you. We're looking for a different kind of restaurant, not a pizza and chicken joint. We want something else. I expect more out of this community when we have businesses wanting to come here and wanting to do business in our community. We can do better.
Is there anybody else on the commission or, yep?
So I think there's a balance, right, between public input and keeping the developers' confidentiality. And, it's a pendulum, and going to two meetings, I think, swings that pendulum a little more towards the public input side than it does confidential, and vice versa. But we already have a process in place that I feel is very good about offering opportunity for the public in one meeting, and I get it's published and they can come, but also allowing the developer to feel like they're being heard and confidentially is being kept. So that would be our current process. That's what we already do. I don't see why we need to change it to make it, to increase or decrease our competitive advantage in the state when we have the opportunity for public to come and have input on something that's on the agenda that if they want to come, they can come, they'll hear about it. I know it's not 2 meetings, but it's still, they have time to hear about it. So in my mind, I don't see why we change what we're already doing when it is a good balance of public and private coming together.
And I want to echo that too. And as I'm listening tonight and trying to digest both sides of this, of the thinking, I think it's important for public input. That is extremely important. But I also, what is important is for us to also stay competitive. So I am becoming more concerned that by us adjusting or modifying what we're doing now, that we may be less competitive than we want to be. I just wonder, is there any common ground here where we can not go the 2 meetings, but maybe make the public more aware that we may have a land transaction happening? Is there any thoughts on that, Dave, that you might have, just whether that be publishing it, social media, something where we don't put ourselves at a disadvantage, but we give the public as much advantage to be able to come to the meeting and sit in in and give input?
I mean, we can pretty much develop any process the commission wants, and essentially the agenda is finalized on Friday before the meeting, so that would be the earliest anybody would have access to it. So that would be the point in time where any of those other processes could occur. Yeah, and I think Nancy asked a good question about what if the proposal is just a third-party corporation that does not yet describe what the project is, but the commission has had access to the information and knows that it's a project that they want to see. And we have those once in a great while. That's why I say there's so many different variables. Then even at the first meeting, or if we had 2 meetings, the public's going to say, well, what's the end project? And I think that's the final topic of discussion here is, do we want to continue economic development type projects in a confidential manner as we have? If we're saying that even if a company isn't comfortable announcing their name, even at the very, at that action, which sometimes they're still not, they want to work through, as Lynn Peterson said, work through a shell corporation to maintain their competitive advantage. We'll have that second meeting or even at the first meeting and get those questions about what is this really? And we have had that, and our answers at that point have said what the prospect has authorized us to say. In other words, what sector of retail is it? We had one of these in front of us with Dave Hosmer not too long ago, where he's got a option right of first refusal, where he was not able to name a corporate name and could only talk about a retail sector or a type of product. So there's still other variables. I apologize to Commissioner Hunoff. The only reason I mentioned appraisals before in my comments was because Mr. Means did and I got off track. My apologies for that. You're right.
I think one process I think we could offer up to, in the spirit of transparency, we have a news alert system in place at the city that notifies people. They can sign up for it and be notified of various things going on. On Fridays, we could, when the packet drops, we could send the public who subscribes to that a notification saying, hey, the packet for Monday night is available. Here's a link to the packet. And if you've ever looked at the packet, like this week's, I think it's over 200 pages long. So there's a lot of information there for people to digest if they're interested in it. They'll have the whole weekend to digest it and talk to commissioners and show up Monday night for the meeting. So I think that's one way we can offer up more transparency, not necessarily just for economic development incentives, but for anything we're doing.
And I think that's a great comment. Commissioner Johnson, I am concerned that tying one of our hands behind our back, so to speak, when it comes to economic development is not a great idea, especially when we are operating within the confines of state law. That's just concerning to me. But again, with that being said, I think the transparency is important. So if there is a way that we can inform the public, our citizens, that this is going to be happening and they can come and give input, I think that's also important too.
One issue that I have with the Friday and then Monday is that the information comes out and people can read it, but it makes it hard, it makes it difficult within that time frame to get any momentum built up if you were opposed to something. You can come and you can speak, but it's tough to get any momentum and get a chance to talk to other folks and have them be able to understand maybe why you're opposed to a said project. So that's one of the reasons why I would like to have the two meeting. I know that there's complications with it, and I know that, like what Mason said, the pendulum swing, right? And I understand that, and it might be that pendulum swings too far one direction, and we do have an issue, and then maybe we have to adjust that at that time. That's one of the reasons that we're talking about this is because we've had an issue, right? We've had something that has caused some controversy. You know, Mr. Kraft, when he was speaking, was talking about how we've got a good thing going. And I believe we do have a good thing going, but I do believe that when there's hiccups in the road, and when maybe that good thing maybe isn't going as good as it has been going, maybe you need to adjust it a little bit. And I kind of view it as the two meeting thing, the two meeting motion as something that we could do towards that end. And if it, sometimes you create problems by creating solutions, and if that becomes the case, then we adjust at that time. But I think we need to be careful not to be afraid to do things, to change things just because of the potentials. I think right now we're kind of working off of something that has occurred and maybe needs some adjustment because of that.
And I think that's a really good point. I think momentum is also important. So to your point, if you're going to build momentum and there's momentum then with a potential company coming here, and now do you then sabotage that momentum as well if you then wait 2 weeks and then lose that momentum, and now City X says, hey, come on over here, we've got this incentivized property for you, or whatever that is, whatever that looks like, and now we lose out on something that we would have loved to have here, along with all the taxes that'll go along with that, and just the betterment of having it in our community. Just having it here for our citizens. I think there's a delicate balance that we need to strike. I'm just afraid that if we do wait the 2 weeks, the two meetings, and keep in mind too, so we're saying two meetings. So again, we haven't clarified. So if someone comes forward and we have a meeting on today, I can say, well, let's have a special meeting in a couple days, whatever that looks like, and it's still two meetings, right? So you talk about momentum, then you're not going to give people then the 2 weeks or 10 days, whatever it is, to before the next meeting, because we could have a special meeting. Correct?
Yeah, you can call that. I think the other thing too here is there's been several projects in Yankton where they haven't been 100% supported by the community, and yet I think as since football just kicked off. As we look at being Monday morning quarterbacks, we go, oh, okay. Yeah, that was a hard time for our community. And I'm not originally from here, so some of them I've heard stories on, but I think we can all agree as you look back, I heard the federal prison coming to town was quite contentious, and some people are chuckling. And there was a large contingency of, I shouldn't say large, I don't know. I know there was a contingency of people that did not want that in our community, and I would challenge you to say, okay, what does our community look like now if that wasn't here? There was a contingency against Walmart and what Walmart was going to do and where they were going to build that. What does our community look like when we lose a large retail franchise where it's at and the leakage we would have had there? I've heard people weren't happy with Hy-Vee because they were going to put part of their store is in liquor sales, and it's right next to an elementary school. How dare we do that and put alcohol in front of our elementary students? Yet, what would our community look like if it wasn't here? So I'm not saying it's not important to hear from people, but I think we need to keep in mind pretty much a lot of what we do here isn't going to make everybody happy. And so I was thinking about that over the weekend and wanted to share that.
And I would agree with that. I would like to state that we need to have those discussions, right? This is the forum, this is the place for those discussions. So if people are the Hy-Vee, you're talking about the federal prison camp, the high school in town. That was a very contentious issue at the time. But you have those conversations, you work through those, you majority rules, right? You have a vote, and sometimes it might be 5-4, but that's the reason why you have an odd number of people on the commission, so that there is a majority. I just think that by allowing those two meetings, it does give a chance for a neutral, an equal playing field to be had.
There was just a couple of things. Sorry. Just a couple of things that kind of bothered me. Is it sounds like we're strictly having this conversation because of paradigm. It seems like it's coming down to one business, one decision, and it's just like in an employer situation. You don't create policy because one person does something wrong. You address that situation and you move forward. So tying our hands because of one situation that some people don't agree with doesn't seem right. The other item is talking about scrutinizing new people coming into the community. Boy, that defeats the whole opening conversation we had. Like, that is really discouraging.
Nancy Winandy, 1205 Peyton Lane. Thank you, Mayor Mosher, for reminding me it was Walmart of why I ran for the city commission and served for 9 years, and how wrong I was back then with my views on development. I thought if you knew one fact or one piece of information, you understood a project. And that is so wrong. There are so many complex features that go into these projects that you cannot just look at one data point or the name of the business or what they might sell and think you understand everything. And I wanted to take the point that Ben and Mike were making regarding how prospects are going to, maybe look at this project. We're not going to know a lot of them because they're going to avoid Yankton. They're not going to participate, so they're not going to engage Dave. They're not going to engage me in the conversation about wanting to come to Yankton if they know or their company requires that level of confidentiality. They will just go to another community, so we will not know the opportunities that we've missed.
And I apologize, Nancy, I didn't realize you were one against Walmart when I brought up that example. I just knew that there was... we all have our reasons we run for city commission, so thank you for that.
Judy Vanderhill, 510 Chalkstone Road. I just wanted to say thank you. I sat on one of those chairs. I know how hard your job is. I know what a balancing act it is. And I just want to say thank you. Part of the reason, I guess, that I've been coming to the meetings is that somewhere along the line, a level of trust was lost. I don't know how it happened. Maybe in this particular business, when people found out about it, oh my goodness, it's a, it's an ammunition, it's a what? It's a rifle making, what? And a little bit of questioning, well, a lot of questioning about how come they got such a deal on the land when our local entrepreneurs are paying twice that amount or more. And so then you start scratching your head and said, wait a minute, what's going on? Why, how did all this happen? And then you come to meetings, you ask questions, and so I get it, a lot of it's confidentiality, and you have to keep that. This has been a wonderful discussion because excellent points have been made on both sides of the situation. Seriously, that's all I've been waiting for. And I give a hand to all the gentlemen and the commissioners that have made excellent points and have argued them well and calmly. I don't know how this is all going to end up, but however it ends up, this is what it means to help build back some trust with the community. It is a balancing act. You have to balance it between those businesses that come in, and you have to make choices, and some of them aren't going to be popular, and you're right. We all pick a topic, or we all pick a business we like and a business we don't like, and by golly, that's it. But the main thing is we have to keep that level of trust. We have to believe that the commissioners we elect are asking the hard questions. Now, maybe you do it, maybe you have to do it in executive session, I don't know. It's kind of troubling to me, but I understand the confidentiality part. So all of you may be asked all these questions in executive session and feel comfortable with the answers. Well, we didn't know any of them. And I'm not sure I'm still comfortable with some of the answers I'm hearing, but at least I'm hearing answers. So I just wanted to get that point out. I hope your discussion continues, and I hope you continue to be thoughtful about what people on both sides are presenting, and then you got to make the choice. You're the decision makers, but just keep us citizens in mind. I am not your adversary at all. I just want to hear more. Thank you.
I just want to put things in perspective too. At our last, there's been a lot of talk about how the hearing played out for Paradigm in May of 2022. But we had 2 economic development issues on our agenda at the last meeting, and there was probably less discussion of those 2 items than there was of the Paradigm project a year ago. So if someone just went back and looked at video from our last meeting, they might say, well, you didn't have any discussion of that issue. Well, yes, commissioners talk to our staff, so we have an understanding of what's going on. But if you look at our commission packets, we do the reading, and so that provides a lot of context for the decisions we're making too. And so if there's no one in the room that's asking questions or listening to us, sometimes it's performative. If we're just sitting and asking questions that we already know the answers to, and we don't know that anyone else has those questions. So I think it's important to understand that too. If people are not in the audience asking us questions, but we have the information in front of us in the commission packets that's also available to the public, there might not always be a lot of discussion. So just watching what happens in the meeting doesn't always tell the whole story. Some perspective there.
Quick question, just to verify, you had noted it in the packet, Amy, about land sales coming out by resolution. Is there anybody else in the state that's doing 2 meetings?
Well, I won't go so far as to say there's no one else in the state doing it. No one that I've spoken to has indicated to me that they're doing that. So I just checked with Vermillion, Watertown, Mitchell, Brookings, Spearfish. So I didn't find anybody that's doing that.
And so my point is that I understand the rationale. My concern is about perception. And it may seem like such a simple thing to say, we'll just do it in 2 meetings. We'll all be here. We're at all the meetings, right? We'll all be here, so fine, we'll do it in 2 meetings. But my concern is that we will create a perception on the part of the developer who looks around. Dave said at our last meeting, here's the checklist. It could be Yankton, Vermilion, Mitchell, Huron, Brookings. And if there's a perception that Yankton is doing something different, that feels like a challenge, that feels like a tightening, that feels like, oh, that's not going to be quite as easy for me, I don't think Yankton's on that list. I don't think Yankton makes the list in the first place. I have real concerns about that we are responding to, reacting to criticisms of a past deal and taking those responses and trying to create an overlay for future deals. And I just think that's going to cause us a lot of problems.
Is there anybody else on the commission that has anything specific to this motion, amended motion? Anybody else in the public? Al, bear with me here. You're going to have to be my...
Bear with me first.
You're going to have to be my wingman.
I just want to clarify to make sure that we get this straight. Because
Correct.
It's not only the original motion, but it's the amended motion. I want to make sure we get them the same.
Yes.
Because if the amended motion fails or passes, you're going back to the original. So to clarify, Brian, what you asked for in your original motion was that any city land development incentivized transactions have 2 meetings. Am I correct?
Really not exactly the way I phrased it. I have it here.
Go ahead.
Turn your mic on.
The wording, I believe, was, and this reflects the amendment, when city officials and buyer...
Go to the original one first.
We have to do the original motion
Okay.
first.
When city officials and buyer agree to terms on an incentivized land transaction, first and second public hearings will be held.
Okay.
Now, I didn't specify 1 week apart, but that's something that if the motion passes, we could work out. At least 1 week apart would be ideal, I would think.
And
Okay.
I think I've got that down good. And then on the amendment, you said
Remove the word
amended it to
incentivized.
land transactions, period.
Yep.
Not that you're leaving out the incentivized
Yep.
part. You still want 2 meetings, though. Thank you.
Yes.
Al, then I think we're on the right page. So seeing no other commission discussion and nobody from the public moving forward, we vote on the amendment to the motion first.
Correct.
Which means you will be voting on a first and a second public meeting for all land transactions. Roll call.
Minor.
No.
Schramm.
No.
Villanueva.
No.
Weber.
No.
Benson.
No.
Brunig.
Aye.
Hanoff.
Aye.
Johnson.
No.
Mayor Mosier.
No, so the amendment fails on vote, which means then we go back to the original motion, which is to have 2 public meetings for incentivized land sales. Did I get that right? Yes? Okay, roll call.
Schramm.
No.
Villanueva.
No.
Weber.
No.
Benson.
No.
Brunig.
No.
Hanoff.
Yes.
Johnson.
No.
Minor.
No.
Mayor Mosier.
No, motion fails. We still are under economic development incentives. Is there any other commission discussion?
Yes, I wanted to talk about, some of the comments addressed appraisals, and that is a motion I would like to make. To me, it's common sense to find out what your property is worth before selling it. Taxpayers want to know the actual amount of the incentive that they have funded. And did we receive 10% of value or 25% or 50%? These are questions the public asks me. I don't know about the rest of you. And I think they deserve to know that, but we can't really provide that answer without an appraisal. You could argue that land at 31st and Broadway was worth 3 or more times what Paradigm paid for it, but nobody really knows because it wasn't appraised. Same with the 4th and Burley property. You know, it was sold for $93,000 3 years ago. What was it worth? We don't know if we don't appraise it. So I guess I always remember this. Would any of us have made these deals using our own dollars? I think that's the way we should treat the public tax dollars. I wouldn't have made that Paradigm deal with my own dollars. That's a question that's important to remember. And I would just say I'm not opposed to incentivized deals when I can see the obvious benefits to the community. And so the motion is, city-owned land will be appraised for market value before selling it in an incentive. I'm going to take out the word incentivized, reflect Ben's comment earlier. City-owned land will be appraised for market value before selling it, period.
All right, so motion is city-owned land will be appraised at market value before selling it. Did I get that? Is there a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Commission discussion. Or Dave or Amy, anything?
I just have a question. Remnant parcels that we go through remnant parcels for, we just did one with the school, I think, although that was probably a transfer. How about the one we sell to Habitat for Humanity or something like that, Ross? Do we treat those as remnant? Those included? Any city, we talk any city?
I guess to phrase that maybe slightly differently, only sales or transactions where ownership changes?
City-owned land will be appraised for market value before selling it. Very simple.
So sales only then, okay.
Somebody wants to amend that, feel free.
Dave, anything to add there as far as, again,
My
now?
only thought as far as trying to get clarification and trying to keep things timely and moving forward when we're working with developers is to if an appraisal, if a valid appraisal was to be in place before any land sale could occur, my recommendation to you would be then to come up with some sort of annual contract to have appraisals on all of our property every 6 months or something. Otherwise, we're going to wait 4 to 8 weeks for a commercial appraisal, less than that for a residential appraisal. If we were to wait for a prospect discussion to get to the point where a land sale was going to maybe occur and then have to put it on hold for 2 months, that could be problematic from the developer's perspective.
You know, Dave, what's the shelf life of a commercial land appraisal? I mean, is it?
So they call it exposure time. That's their fancy word for shelf life. And there are so many variables involved in that also. And I'm not an appraiser. I've read a lot of appraisals and I've talked to appraisers. And when they try and describe what the exposure time is, they discuss things like what's actively occurring in the market in your community at that point. If it's a really active market, the exposure time shrinks. If it's a stagnant market, that exposure time extends. What are interest rates doing? Other factors I don't even know that I could understand in property values and market issues. So the exposure time is variable.
And I can appreciate where you're coming from with having those appraisals ready to go when a land transaction is coming up. But if we're paying $4,000 a year for every parcel we own to have it on the ready, to not know when we're going to have that sale. I mean, it just seems like that's a misuse of taxpayer money to constantly be having those appraisals done on something that may or may not happen in the future. But I get where you're coming from that perspective, to have those so it doesn't delay the project.
Well, some might think it may also be a waste of taxpayer money to sell something at 10% of value, which under the current system could happen.
Well,
go
sorry,
ahead.
Mayor. One of the things as I sit here and again digest all of this back and forth, which is wonderful because we're talking about it. So I do think it's important too then to also keep in mind, so if the land appraises for whatever that value is, what is also the benefit then of having whatever that company is coming to town? Does it benefit the community to sell it at much below the appraised price? Does it benefit the community to give the land away because of whatever that business is coming to town is going to improve the quality of life for our citizens? I think that's something you also have to take into account. Even if we have the appraisal, it may be well below what the appraised value is at the time we have it. Something to think about.
I think that's a good point. Didn't we do that with Menards? Didn't they get that land for free?
Yeah, there was another very complicated project that involved a private headhunter, basically, or a real estate agent that was trying to help us land a home improvement business. But yes, Menards ended up with a really good deal, just similar to Prince Hydraulics and L&M Radiator, and land deals have changed over time and communities' priorities.
Matt.
Again, I'd like to use Mason's education here a little bit. So are you able to tell me about how many deals you do a year, roughly? Or no?
Sure. I individually about 50. The company I own, 200, give or take.
Quite a bit. So how many of those deals have appraisals done before they're bought?
0.
So I've done a lot of deals. I have done appraisals before, and I've done appraisals after, both. Like I said, they can be off millions. Even on a $1 million deal, $2 million deal, they can be off $1 million, $2 million. Maybe Mason can agree with me this. The price of a property is appraised at what it will be paid for. Like, what people will pay for is the value of that property. So again, with the value of the property, how valuable is it to have Menards here? It's, in my opinion, it's valuable to our community. It comes opinionated. I think appraisals are opinionated, period. I don't know how else to explain it. The city is playing SimCity. I don't know how many times if you have played that, but it is great. I love the fact that our city is playing SimCity. I was on the county planning commission for quite some time, and I wish we played SimCity. I really do. But now there's ag in the middle of our biggest subdivision, Riverside Acres. Why would we do that? I am so proud of our city for doing this. I want you to keep doing it. Please don't ruin it by... The appraisal's not going to matter. It's not. Like, the appraisal will come in at whatever it's bought at. I've done it a million times. There's strategies that I use in all of my... Ross has seen it. Like, I've developed strategies that realtors don't even know what's going on, that been in the business for 40 years, you guys. Like, I'm telling you, appraisals do not matter. You are a business. The city is a business, okay? You need to think of this as a business. If we compare it to the mall, if I put a store in there and I sell the space for free to whoever it is, like a good traffic place would be like, say, Verizon or something like that. They get a lot of traffic in there. So why would I not give one free space to that person in the middle of the mall where we get a ton of foot traffic? It's a smart business decision. It's great SimCity playing. So I think it's very hard to use appraisals for this decision making when there's so many other variables, such as a great company coming in or a local company. It doesn't have to be like some national store or whatever. It can be somebody like me that you guys can, be helping out, that brings in jobs to these people. I keep the money here, you guys. Like, I pay local contractors, everybody here. Like, there's a million different ways. So just please don't add any more rules in here. Just keep helping people out just like you're doing. Don't change anything. You're doing a great job. Keep playing SimCity. That's my advice to you guys, is just use it as a business and try and help people like you've been doing.
Charlie Gross, 1510 Burley. Your motion doesn't say whether this is to be a commercial appraisal, or does the statute, Ross, still allow the appointment of 3, I think it says landholders or something like that. That's what we used to do. We would get 3 people out of the community to say this is what it's worth, 3 realtors or whoever. Is that still allowable?
That's still allowable. It's not required if you're going through Thrive, but that is still a technique that is utilized for an outright sale. If it's an alternative approach.
You need to clarify what you want in terms of an appraisal. And I agree with Matt, appraisals don't matter in the long run.
They may not matter to you, but I hear from a lot of members of the public that want to know what that value was that we incentivized.
I think land sales are just one potentially small part of the puzzle we're putting together when we're putting together economic development deals. If we, earlier tonight, we heard a list of all the different prices that we've had per acre on sales that we've had. Well, each one of those projects has a story that if you're interested in listening to, it will help you understand why we came to the conclusions we did. And, you can look at the Paradigm project. It's been, I think, insinuated that the approximately $4.5 million in infrastructure improvements we're doing on that property are just for the Paradigm project. That's not the case at all. What Paradigm allowed us to do with that initial investment of what we thought initially was going to be about $5 million, now sounds more like $6 million, is it created a TID with enough value that hopefully as it continues to develop, it will fund the infrastructure needed to develop that site. And Paradigm will only benefit from about 11% of that. So it's about $450,000. Well, then Paradigm agreed to help us apply for a state infrastructure grant, and we ended up getting it, the maximum amount possible, which is $213,000 approximately. And in doing that, they waived their discretionary funds. So in property taxes, they're going to end up having to pay probably more than $100,000 in property taxes that they otherwise wouldn't have had to pay. So right there is more than $300,000 that the community will benefit from, because what that infrastructure is doing is it's going towards the Yankton Youth Soccer Association development, which would they be able to pay for that infrastructure? I don't think so. So it would be on the city taxpayers to pay for that. On the north side, we have the potential development that Dave Hosmer and Stephanie Tamasia are hoping to do down the road if it all works out. So this has already helped spur infrastructure that is going to help current development, it's going to help future development, and it's going to help the Yankton Youth Soccer Association, which I don't think any of us argue is a great development for the city and our future and for our kids. So it's just one example of how land prices do not tell the whole story of these packages. Nancy.
I was just waiting for the mayor to address that.
I was like, I'm just making sure nobody else had anything to say. So go ahead, Nancy.
Nancy Wenandy, 1205 Peyton Lane. I would encourage you all, when you think about land sales, as an elected official sitting up behind that table, do not treat it as if it was a personal sale that you are making. If you are doing things for your own business or your own family, you want to make money in those transactions. The city and Thrive, when we do land sales, are trying to create wealth in our community. Matt was correct when he was talking about that. It's not just the price of the land that you might be receiving on a sale. There are so many more things that happen. And as trusted elected officials sitting behind that desk, I expect you to take a look at the entire project. What is the big picture of what we're trying to accomplish in our community? Does this project fit into our comprehensive plan? If it doesn't, in those discussions that you have offline, you will analyze those things, and it might not be a good fit for Yankton no matter what they are offering for a price on that land. So Nathan, you did a nice job of summarizing what's happening on one of the projects, but I will say right now the city does not own a lot of land that will be available for commercial development. And correct me if I'm wrong, you have about 40 acres on the airport, which are airport-specific property or projects that would need to happen. So those are not just general business projects that would happen. You have 36 acres of land that was originally 40 acres that you did in the transfer with soccer, which was originally referred to as the 40-30 land, and you transferred 4.5, 5 acres to Lewis and Clark Behavioral for their project to have appropriate drainage to make that happen. And through that process, Thrive paid for engineering on that property because we were considering doing that as a housing project. I'm probably, I don't want to put a percentage on it. I'm relatively certain that you will have a hard time, based upon the engineering that we received on that property, receiving what may be appraised value because of a lot of the challenges that are associated under the dirt on that property or getting infrastructure into that property. So I expect my trusted elected officials to be talking with each other, and as Judy said, asking those tough questions, whether it's in executive session or at the public meetings, to scrutinize these projects, but it cannot just be on the land sale alone. So I would encourage you to not spend the money on an appraisal process on land sales for the city of Yankton.
Anybody else on the commission with thoughts? Anybody else in the public? Roll call.
Everybody knows the motion, right? Okay.
The motion is to do an appraisal at market value when city land is being sold.
The motion was city-owned land will be appraised for market value before selling it.
Are we ready again? Villanueva.
No.
Weber.
No.
Benson.
No.
Brunig.
No.
Hanoff.
Yes.
Johnson.
No.
Minor.
No.
Schramm.
No.
Mayor Mosier.
No, so motion fails. We are still under number 2, under old business. Is there any other discussion from the commission?
I believe it's our responsibility to find out who we're doing business with when we give away, in some cases, millions of taxpayer dollars. We should always try to be as certain as possible that recipients of these taxpayer resources can be trusted and are worthy of our taxpayer-funded incentives. My motion would be, before entering an incentivized transaction, city officials would do a background check of the buyer. That's the end of the motion, but the idea is to find out the buyer's finances, business experience, litigation history, if there is any. That's important things to know when we're giving away that kind of a resource.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
We do have a motion and a second to do background checks of the buyer.
Clarification question from staff is, when we're dealing with a corporation, how would that function? Would it be the president, the board of directors, the shareholders? How would that function?
If the buyer was the corporation, then you'd do a background check of the corporation.
And if I could just interrupt just for a second to make sure what I understand the motion. So as we move forward, if there's amendments or anything, but Brian, you said before entering into incentivized transactions, background checks will be required?
Before entering an incentivized transaction, city officials will.
Can you please turn on your mic?
Before entering an incentivized transaction, city officials will complete a background check of the buyer.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you. One of the things that I think was brought up tonight that I know Mr. Kraft had brought up, I think Mr. Speck brought up too, is that it is important to remember that if these shell corporations come forward to buy land, in fact, I was just sitting here and it reminded me of, I think Disney. Disney's one of they created so many different shell corporations so that they didn't jack up the price of their own land that they were trying to purchase. If they knew that it was one entity trying to purchase that much land, then it would have drove the price up. And my point with that is that we can, if someone comes forward that wants to have their anonymity, and it remains confidential, they could just create a shell corporation or whatever that is, and we may, I don't think we may get the exact answers that we're looking for anyway, if that makes sense.
Not sure this is helpful to the discussion or not, but I do form a lot of businesses. And in South Dakota, you can create blind companies, meaning you need an organizer, but the organizer need not be the owner. So you can create an entity that has no public paper trail identifying back to the actual owner of that business. It is done statewide with some amount of regularity for just that type of situation. And businesses can be formed, corporations and LLCs can get a legal existence, same-day turnaround in South Dakota now.
And Ross, that doesn't mean there's something nefarious happening. It's just business.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah. It's not suggesting it's statutorily created fraud by any means. It's just a business technique.
You know, one concern I have with background checks, not in the idea of a background check. You know, when I hire an agent to come onto the brokerage, the state does a background checks for various things, and they have their rules on that. What are we looking for? Is there a set standard of things we would dismiss a business from the owner, the company, the board of directors from having on their record that would prevent them from opening a business? If not, is that I think opens up for some legal issues, because it's a big gray area that, I mean, you're being subjective at that point instead of objective, and that for me is not okay. I think we have to look at this objectively.
I think, because the other thing I want to point out is we would be doing a background check on Matt Evans, and when this was brought up, Matt's shaking his head. Nobody wants to know what's in Matt's background. I bring that up because when this was brought up to me as an idea, somebody said, well, we're not going to check Yankton residents. You can't do that. This is an all or none. So when you're doing something like this, you don't get to pick and choose. And Ross, I bring that up because I think it ties into Mason's question, which was mine, is we don't pick and choose. It's an all or none without opening ourselves up for lawsuits, correct?
Well, I mean, sort of what we're doing in economic development is picking and choosing. And that's less of a concern to me than the privacy aspect. If we're going to do that on the front side, we're going to need to get consents from those participants to cooperate. You have to consent to a full background check, which means we're also then going to need to define what kind of background checks are we doing? I mean, what is it? I mean, criminal background check probably is pretty easy, but what's a financial background check? Are we going to run credit histories? I mean, we would have to define it well enough that we could make a release, and they would have to authorize us to do that. And then who has access to that? Who is it shared with? To what extent can we promise confidentiality with those reports? And policy-wise, you can impose that, but we need to nail all of that down on the front side and uniformly put it into effect.
Judith Gregg, 2511 Burley, Yankton. I'm not a public speaker, so I'm shaking. But I think a lot of what we're talking tonight could have been not done if we would have known who the buyer was, his education. He said he had all these degrees and everything. If you go online, you cannot find any place he went to school. Then his attorney was here. Yes, I'll find out. He comes back, no, he won't. He doesn't want that information out. Now, he lives right across a golf hole from me. There is nothing going on in that backyard. There are no lights on during the night except like a little orange light. I know that he does live there because somebody on the other side has seen him. But it's just a suspicious thing. You talk about people coming in. Governor Noem doesn't want people from China buying that land. How do we know? He's not backed. Now, maybe one of you guys know him. Maybe you know his education, but you can't tell me that you hire a teacher and don't check on her education. You don't hire a doctor and he comes in and he says, I'm a surgeon. You don't check his background. You don't, any of you people that hire somebody, you look at him. You don't go, oh, okay, who was it here that I was going to say? Mr. Peterson. You don't hire a teller and not check and see if she hasn't been taking money out of the till from some other bank. We just wanted to know who he was. And because you were so willing to sell this to him at a discounted rate, we wondered if you were keeping something from us, just to sell this prime piece of property to put a big, tall building on to welcome into Yankton. Now, one of the things that I found that he thought that location was great because people could fly in close to from the airport, pick up their guns and leave. Now, he's not bringing anything into town. He's not going to eat there. He's not going to do, he's not going to go to a movie. There's just so many things that as a taxpayer, I don't like the 20-year TID. That's not going to help me in the long run. It's not going to help my kids. All that, what's he going to, how much is he going to pay a year on that $7 million piece of where he's going to build the gun didn't help either. But a lot of people aren't going to see that benefit. You're not going to lower my taxes because you're going to get a lot of taxes from him. You're putting that back into the construction that's still going on. And isn't he supposed to be building it now? Wasn't there a date that he was supposed to? I mean, I know that the building is coming in as pieces. It's not going to, I just don't understand. But I do think that you need to do some background checks just to please taxpayers, because I'm not the only one. There's a lot of people that aren't sitting here that wonder about it too. So, just all you have to do is verify his education. And as an agent that should know who he was, should be able to tell you what he does too.
So when it comes to the issue of getting to know who we're selling property to in this case, I would argue if we're going to do background checks, we should do them with everyone who's getting economic development incentives, whether it's land sales, facade grants, sales tax rebates, tax increment districts, all of it. Dave, how long did you work with Dr. Kenfield before the project came before the commission?
Right around 6 months.
6 months. So right there, you're developing a relation, and that is an important part of economic development is relationships, developing trust, and so you're getting to know these individuals, and so by the time you bring them to us, you know them pretty well, and because otherwise you wouldn't be bringing them forward. You've run them through a lot of questions and trust issues so that you feel comfortable even bringing them to us.
So
correct?
a majority of the time, it's a process of the prospect trying to eliminate communities from consideration. It's not the other way around. We were fortunate in this instance that Mr. Kentfield did have some ties and reasons, including local investors, to be interested in Yankton. And so he was hopeful from the beginning that something positive could happen. And that information was presented, and it did. So that's, the projects we're talking about are all ones that are the 20-some projects, or pick a number, that actually happened. So in my mind, those are all successes. We're not talking about the other hundreds of projects that didn't happen because something happened along the lines of discussion where we were eliminated or there wasn't trust on both sides. So, we've talked to the commission a number of times about projects that didn't work for some reason or another too. And sometimes it's something as simple as we don't have the utility capacities for them, or other things like that are just kind of more functional.
And Dave, over the course of your, is it 30 years now in economic development? Over 30 years?
District 3 for 5 years, and it'll be 30 years for the city in December.
Yeah, so during that time, how much, what is the dollar amount you would attach to the valuation of development that you have been in one way or another involved with over the course of your career? Do you have any idea what that number would be?
Credit's not due to any one person ever. I imagine that if you do the math on all the projects, public and private, that I've somehow been a part of the discussion on, it's over $1 billion.
So over $1 billion that you have had some level of involvement in. Yes, it's a team effort, but a lot of that has centered around you. And the reason that the projects that you've been really involved with have succeeded is because of the level of integrity that you bring to your job and the level of trust that commissions over those decades have had in you. We could maybe point some individual cases where things didn't work out, like Alcoa was a deal where the city commission worked with them on a road project. Alcoa didn't end up expanding like they thought they would, but they tried to make amends, and it ended up that we've had some development out there, so it ended up working out. So yeah, things don't always work out the way we think they will, but the vast majority of these projects have turned out, and you have been a really important part of that. And I'll tell you, the reason I trust your opinion when you bring a project to us is because of that track record and the integrity that I see you work with in your office every day under some very difficult circumstances and under some really aggressive suggestions that you don't act with integrity. And it bothers me that through this process especially, there have been a lot of accusations made about you and the work that you do, because you do a great job, and it should be recognized. And I know it's been a tough summer for you, and I just want you to know that I support you, and obviously a lot of other people in this room support you.
If I may, I would make one small correction to that statement about Alcoa too, because yes, there was a project that didn't go as originally planned, but quite honestly, the governor and the state economic development stepped up and made us whole. So we didn't even lose out on anything there. We gained.
This is why we have the historians in the room. Thank you, Al.
He's figuring out a way to pass it on to Lisa, yeah. Go ahead, Jim.
Dave, I support you too. But anyway, what I wanted to mention about is I don't even like the term background checks, because I think that's such a, it seems so specific, and I talked to Ben about that a little bit, and he said when he did bus driving for the school, they did a background check on him. And, I mean, there's all different kinds of that, and for that, they want to make sure he wasn't a pedophile, he didn't have speeding tickets, or, a careful driver and all that. That's what they want to know. And they did their due diligence. And that's for that job, that's what you need to do. And I think a certain amount of due diligence is important with everything. And it's a little bit like welcoming. I think anybody that comes that looks to do a business in Yankton is doing some due diligence on Yankton. I mean, if they're worth hiring, or, bringing them in, they've looked over Yankton. They know something about it. They know the population. They know lots of stuff about us. And we should know somebody about people we're going to partner with, too. And it's just like she talked about welcoming when you come into a new business, a new job, a new city. What you want to do is you want to smile and so forth. But it's also nice to ask somebody a question. And it just amazes me. The first thing I did when Amy sent me Ken Field's bio, I looked and I thought, Jesus, he's got three masters and a PhD, and he's 34 years old, and he's got 2 businesses. One of them he's selling, and going to use some of that money to start the business here. I thought pretty impressive. So I thought, I got to look at this, look this guy up. There's nothing there. Someplace along the line, I think somebody said, gee, where'd you go to school? That's really impressive. I mean, there would have been just a welcoming conversation. You'd know something about this person. And it seems like nobody that I've talked to knows anything more about him other than what is in his bio. And that just bothers me. When I don't even, a background check, no, I don't think you have to do a background check on everybody. But I think anytime something comes up that is interesting or doesn't seems amazing, I think you should look at it. And you don't have to do the same thing on everyone. We've heard over and over again in every deal is unique. Every business is unique. Every applicant is unique. And everything you have to do due diligence on is unique. And it isn't, Amy, you said in the meeting, you do background checks on employees. Well, you don't do them on the transfer station necessarily, do a background check on those people. You don't have to do the same thing on everybody. That's just complete nonsense. You don't have to do a background check on Stephanie Tamasia because she bought a piece of property up there. I think you don't have to do the same thing, and they aren't the same questions on everybody. If it's Walmart, you probably don't need to check and do much of a background check. If it's a business you've never heard of, you might look in Dun and Bradstreet or someplace. There's all different kinds of places to look if it's a business. To sit here and think that you're going to have to check, to a certain extent, if somebody's got a bad driving record, it doesn't affect them having a business. If you're going to be a bus driver, it probably does make a big difference. So and if there's just, you have to use some sense in the thing. That we can't do anything and we don't do the same thing on every prospect is ridiculous. So
Jim, who do you think who makes the decision? Do we have a 5-4 vote? Or do we have a vote on every business to determine whether they need a background check? I don't understand who should make the decision.
I think what you need to do is you need to know who you're doing business with. I don't think you have to have a vote on it. I just think you should know who you're doing business with. You should ask them a couple of questions. If things seem tremendous, you just say, congratulations, you won the U.S. Open this year. That must have been pretty exciting. Or something about them. You know something about them, talk to them. Find out something about them. If they've got a business, find out about the business, because how healthy their business is wherever else it is probably a pretty good indication on how healthy their business is going to be in Yankton if they've got other businesses. I think you just do a sensible due diligence. It's not a background check. It's not, I think, and I don't think you need to check their education unless they brag about it, or unless you hear about it. You might, if they're, anything they tell you, you might want to make pretty sure it's the truth. And if they're not telling, and if stuff seems like bullshit, you might want to see, is this really true? You know, I mean, you might just think, because if they're telling you stuff that isn't true about one thing, there's a fair chance something else they tell you is not true either. And that's, it's just making just good business sense. You wouldn't hire somebody that came in and told you a whole bunch of stuff that sounds outrageous, and then without checking and say, God, that's really tremendous. I mean, and then if you checked and it wasn't accurate, you probably wouldn't hire them. I mean, you just think, you know, that's, I mean, if you think you need to do I don't think you need to do a background check on everybody, but I think you should do a basic understanding of who it is. I think, first of all, it's good business. If I'm doing business with somebody, I talk to them, I ask them about themselves, ask them about what they're doing. If I've got a client, I try to know a little bit about them. Because first of all, I got a better chance to keep them as a client. And secondly, I'll know better if there's somebody I want to work with or do business with. So that's my point on this. And I think I brought it up before, one of the first meetings I complained about it. We don't know anything about this guy. Nobody seems to know. Amy was going to talk to him and find out. He wouldn't say anything. His attorney sat right next to me. I chatted with him, and he said, and he came out after the meeting and said to me, he says, I'm certain my client will be happy to answer all your questions. I just am not in a position to answer them right now. Then I get a letter from him a week later and said, nobody from Paradigm is going to share any private and personal information with you. And I guess where they went to school is private and personal. I don't know. Or what city their businesses are in, these two businesses he supposedly started. What city are they in?
Jim,
that's private? Once
Jim,
you put it in the telephone book.
Excuse me, you've spent a lot of time publicly questioning Dr. Kenfield and saying we don't know anything about him, but have you actually talked to Dr. Kenfield? Have you reached out to him? When we're talking about being a welcoming community, have you reached out to him and tried to welcome him?
No.
And asked him some of these questions that you're concerned about?
What my question with him is, I don't necessarily believe what he's saying. So asking him and him telling me those things wouldn't satisfy my uncomfort with him. And I asked Amy, I asked Nancy if they knew the answers, and she said no, but Nancy said she'd try to set up lunch with me so I could ask those questions. And I said, really, I just as soon find out get the information, and then I can double check it. But have any of you asked him those questions? Have you?
I've had conversations with Dr. Kenfield. He's shared a lot with me.
Did he
that
mention
doesn't necessarily mean
Did he
gives
mention
me
where he got
permission to
all
share
these
it
degrees?
publicly. What's that?
Did he mention where he got all his degrees?
He has not. No.
What cities are these two businesses in that he has, that he founded, and one of them is in the process of selling? You know what city they're in?
He has told me a lot, and this is.
I think,
yes,
we're getting really down a rabbit hole, and I'm not saying.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, so I want to kind of bring us back around to the motion that's here and see if there's any other discussion.
I'd like to make some commentary about the concept of the background check. And I think it is something that, obviously, as a teacher, that's, if I want to have a career in education, then I'm going to consent to background checks, right? So that I can be employed by a school district. Same is true if you want to work in a bank or be a social worker. Those are employer-employee relationships. which is vastly different than stepping into a contract for a land sale, right? A private citizen has a right to privacy. My concern, and there are many when we get into this particular issue, we can't pick and choose. A governmental entity cannot pick and choose who we're going to look into the backgrounds of. That has to be absolutely consistent across the board. What are we looking for? Why are we looking for it? What information is going to be gathered? By whom? Is that the police? Is that our attorney? Are we hiring someone? Who holds the information? Who has access to it? If you step into an educational system, there's an HR department that works to control and manage employee information. This isn't an employee, right? So who's holding that information? Is that city attorney? Is that city attorney staff? Is the commission brought in? And then the huge question is, and the place where we would be likely to encounter a lawsuit, what are the actionable items? I assume that you want us to gather information so that we can say no to certain people. What are those actionable items, right? That had better be spelled out in black and white, and there cannot be wiggle room. What are we looking for? If the commission wants to go down that path and secure background checks and take action on them, I think that's beyond, I think that's 100 barrels full of worms. But I do think if the pieces aren't in place, then we are asking for a lawsuit, period.
So I've thought about this a lot, and I've been trying to, all the things that I've tried to think about have been something that overarches over any deal. So it's not a pick and choose, right? Because I do. I think that's a fool's errand. When you start picking and choosing, then you argue over the picking and choosing. I think there needs to be things that are over the top of everything. That was the two-meeting thing. I figured that was over the top of everything, which was why I was in favor of that. With this one, I think a lot of this, background checks, Jim had mentioned that I drive school bus part-time in the mornings for the Yankton School District. And part of that was that I had to go into a background check. Now, what is that? That means that I go down to the county, the city county jail. I go in, I give fingerprints, they put it against the database, they check me against everything, and I fortunately, I came out clean. So that's that background check. So background checks can mean a lot of different things. And again, it's picking and choosing. And corporations, how do you do it with that? Lewis and Clark Behavioral Health. How do we do it in that instance? The thing that I have come to on this is that if we could have something where it was like a boilerplate on the contract, that here's the proposal, right? So the proposal for whatever this contract is, the proposal that the buyer is putting forth to the city, that the proposal, that everything inside that proposal is accurate and truthful, right? So that they're not giving false pretense to anything. This would cover everybody, everything. They're not providing false pretense to anything, and that they would be willing to give supportive evidence to that, of the things that are in that contract, of their proposal, right? So, and if we could have that as I don't know, Ross, if that's possible, to have something that is written up, every time you do your taxes, you fill out a job application. There's so many times that you're signing a line that says that the information that you're providing is truthful and accurate to the best of your knowledge. You know, if it could be something along those lines, and then that can be something that, again, covers everything. Because again, going back to picking and choosing, that's where all of this is going to fall apart. I think, you know, I do think that there's some things that we could do better, and this is one that I think could possibly be done better. But the background check, I think that's picking and choosing. But I do think that that we could do something that, again, goes over the top of everything, and it is a proposal, and your proposal, what you're stating in your proposal is accurate and truthful, and that you would be willing to provide that information if it's questioned, right? That's my 2 cents from a bus driver.
So to kind of hone your idea down into something physical that staff could work with, you're basically talking about kind of like an addendum to purchase contracts that would have like a reps and warranties. You're warranting the information you've shared, the information contained, it's all truthful, and they're agreeing to submit information as requested to verify. You know, that's actually a fairly common part of commercial deals where you're maybe buying businesses and they have to, you know, the seller is verifying that their financial records are sound and things of that nature. Conceptually, that, I mean, we can make something like that, but the question is, what is it that they're actually verifying? And in the purchase agreement, the terms are like, I'm verifying that I'm buying this property for X amount of dollars and that I'm going to get it built within X period of time and the aesthetics will be approved by City Hall. We don't have a lot of information about their financial background in a typical situation, but of course nothing's cookie cutter. Some projects that might fit better than others. But, you know, what is it that they're warranting? And just thinking of the terms that we usually plug into the purchase agreements that you guys approve, you know, in a typical real estate transaction, Mason probably have some background to draw on too. Dan might have some ideas too. But you know, a typical rep or a warranty that you're making in a standard real estate deal is that the business is a legitimate business operating in the state in which it's trying to transact this deal, and that the person who's signing has the authority to bind that entity. But there aren't really a lot of other types of things that are being warranted in the scope of a real estate deal. You know, I agree, I'm buying that piece and you're going to sell it to me on these terms. So, you know, a lot of times the background information that's shared is the context that you guys use to form your deal, but they're not like warranties of the actual transaction. They're just the pros and cons. Do we do this deal based on what they're representing? So that's from a practical standpoint, kind of a hard thing I like the idea that you're trying to get at. I just don't know how practically that it really works very well for most of these types of transactions.
I would think that it would be, you know, that the proposal, everything that's inside of that proposal could be questioned and to be, and then it would be on the buyer's, on the buyer side to provide that information. And it would have, you'd have parameters. You would have a start and an end. It would be within that, you know, information that was within that proposal.
So it's not so much the contract, the proposal that preempts the contract that.
Yeah, because the proposal is what we're making our decision off of. Would be that's what I come to. And again, it's trying to come to something that covers everything. So it's not a pick and choose. I don't know. It's the one thing to me that seems to hold water. And I haven't been able to find something that causes it not to hold water. That doesn't mean that there's not. Again, you know, I'm up for the conversation about it, but that was something that I've thought of and talked with other folks about. And I just wanted to share it here because we're all sharing.
So the proposal or the motion on the table is about background checks. And, I want to give a real world example in Yankton. So Blue 14 LLC is a company in town that owns a very prominent parcel along Broadway, not far from Paradigm. That is, the registered agent at the state is an attorney out of Mitchell. So if we did a background check on Blue 14 LLC, it'd be on that attorney out of Mitchell. Has no bearing on actually what the company is, because the company's Culver's and operated, it's not the apples and oranges. It's the exercise in futility when you're doing background checks for a lot of these companies, because that's how they do business. They want that protection of confidentiality. And, Paradigm's maybe more of a rare example because they actually aren't a shell company, a name only. It's actually the company that is operating. But I just don't see how background checks are actually going to mean anything. If we'd have done a background check on Blue 14, what would we have found? I mean, other than the bar record of the attorney that's of record. So I just don't see how it's feasible for us to, and actually it's going to produce anything of value.
Other commission discussion?
I think there's a practicality, issue two. The city cannot gather information without consent. And I don't know how that happens, when that conversation occurs. We're talking about, it's welcoming week, so welcome to Yankton. My name is Dave. Can I get you a lemonade, and do you mind signing a consent form so we can run a background check? I assume we'd want to run that before we would invest a great deal of time with an individual, or are we saving that until the end? Again, I feel like this is a reactionary idea that comes from the paradigm issue that we're trying to put into an overlay over future deals, and I just don't think it will work.
It does seem pretty reactionary to this deal, but what I will say is that I think it also boils down to communication, where if the first two motions haven't passed, so I think we have to make sure that we do give the public time, again, to however we do that, whether it's social media, let them know that we're going to be talking about a land sale, public land sale. And I want to remind everybody, Dr. Kenfield was here that evening, and I'm not going to sit here and defend him. I do welcome him, but I don't know him personally, so he was here to speak for himself. If we would have made sure that everyone knew that this land sale was happening, and going forward, if we can do a better job of that and still not tie the arm behind our back, so to speak, then people can ask those questions when hopefully that person or entity shows up to answer questions, and then hopefully be welcomed when the answers are heard.
Any other commission discussion?
I feel like this issue is so conflated with Paradigm and who Dr. Kenfield is that I just want to share some things about him after all this time. So majority of the investors in Paradigm are from South Dakota, including Yankton. One of them is Dr. Matt McKenzie, a Sioux Falls orthopedist, who reached out to us and told us that Yankton got a huge win in making the decision to work with Dr. Kenfield on this project. Potential for growth with this technology is almost limitless. And so, when you talk about this project, a lot of the focus has been on the firearms, but really that's just a proving ground for the technology that he's using, that it could be applied to making wheels, wind turbine blades, if the future of this is in aeronautics, defense. So there's a lot that really played into our decision, because we saw that this really had the potential to grow and benefit Yankton over time. Now, it might not. That's totally possible. But we felt strongly that the relationship that had been built with Dr. Kenfield and the technology that he's working with could be, in my opinion, a game changer for Yankton if it all works together. And, an example of a product that he makes that isn't firearms is in the corner of the room there. It's a tube that he manufactured. It's carbon fiber, right, Dave? And it was created because winding machines we're causing injuries, employees. Dave, you maybe know this story better than you, so maybe I should have you tell it. But
So that is a handling tube for different types of material. In this case, it is a carbon resin-based tube with aluminum end caps. And it was designed specifically for one industry that was having issues with employee safety, where the previous tubes they were using were heavy enough that they were difficult to manually handle once they were empty. When they have the material on them, of course, they're using heavier equipment. And they actually had a few injuries with handling the solid aluminum tubes. So that manufacturer came to Dr. Kenfield and said, hey, is there a better way to do this? And they, Paradigm developed that tube, which is significantly lighter and easier to handle. You can walk over there and pick it up easily, where before it might have taken two people to pick it up. And same strength, lighter weight, out in the world functioning.
And when it came to the Paradigm project, we were competing with Montana and Wyoming as a location for them. The reason he selected Yankton was because he thought at the end of the day, South Dakota had the best business climate for him, and he had a business partner who lived here, who convinced him that Yankton was a great place to do business. He had offers from other communities to get free property, but he chose us. It costed him more, but he chose us over them. And Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've had at least one other economic development official in the state tell you that they probably would have given Paradigm free property for this project as well, based on the potential it has.
Correct.
So there's some background. It doesn't always come out right away, but over time, as we learn more and we can share more, I guess. So.
The only other thing I'll add is that, certain individuals are not Chamber of Commerce, chamber mixer type people, and they might work 18 or 20 hours a day, and that's all they do. And that's their focus in life. And they might be smart enough where they know ways where they don't have to have a web presence, but that doesn't mean that they're not legitimate and functioning and going through all the processes legally and correctly.
And that's what Dr. Kenfield has made clear to me in our conversations is he's an innovator, a creator, and that's where he focuses. He's not, as Dave indicated, someone who likes to go to public gatherings and socialize. He loves what he does, and that's what takes up his time. So every project is different.
Yeah, and I would say, too, the other factor you're forgetting here is there's not a whole lot that goes on in the firearm industry without the ATF involved and the level of the federal government in overseeing those types of sales, so.
Is public comment still open?
Yes, sir.
Just so, for what it's worth, I went to his door in South Yankton, knocked on the door. Dr. Kenfield answered, introduced myself. We had a fantastic conversation. He showed me his product. He showed me the high-tech carbon fiber bolt-action rifle that he was producing. I did not ask his education because I could see he was doing exactly what he said he was going to do. He's building rifles, barrels, I can't remember what it was. I had a phone conversation with him. He was out on the West Coast at the time, Seattle area. I can't remember the exact town. The conversation that I had with him was extremely professional. I had no reason to believe there was anything other than he's just a guy that wants to come here and build a business and run it and keep to himself. And that's exactly what I saw. 22 years ago when we moved here, you'll all remember Franny Fox. We weren't in our house for 10 minutes and that car wheeled in the driveway and Franny come running in. Next thing you know, she's in the middle of our living room welcoming us to Yankton. We could use that right now. There's a lot of people that have been extremely successful in this town that are in this room right now. Put yourself in his shoes. We are better than this. We are completely going after this guy on social media, letters to the editor. I agree with questioning. Yes, do your due diligence, question. But right now, we're attacking this poor guy. I don't know him well, but I do know that we are better than going after this guy as it is. We're calling him out on everything. I wouldn't answer the questions either. And it's not because I wouldn't want to be transparent. There's something out there that we all know, and it's the social media mob. You put the answers out there on social media, and then they twist, and then they turn, and then they question. You never get out of that cycle. I don't know, but I believe that's why he's probably not answering the questions. Plain and simple. Thank you.
One additional item, Mayor, is that okay?
Yes, ma'am.
So the other thing is with a background check, even if we do our due diligence, even if we do a background check on his education, on his finances, on his criminal record, the fact is we can't disclose it. So even if you're wanting peace of mind, knowing that it's all accurate, or at least where he went to school, we're not in that position to ever share that information. So once again, then it's us not being forthcoming with the group. I mean, that's just, it's not a fair question to ask. We have to trust that the due diligence is being done. We need to ask the right questions to make sure that we're comfortable with the end result, and trust the process.
And Mayor,
Yes.
I've listened very carefully to all of these arguments over the last 6 months, a year, and I pride myself on taking lots of things into account. And as a small business owner and elected official, it is awful the way we are making it so hard for somebody to run and own a business, and it's embarrassing. And I want to agree with what Mr. Peterson said. We are better than this, and we need to put our money where our mouth is and be welcoming and be hopeful and be thankful that we're bringing such a new technology into our small town, Yankton. I mean, we should be grateful for this. Thank you.
Any other commission comments?
One additional item, one of the things that we always talk about is trying to make the pie bigger. And these are the types of opportunities that we're willing to invest in, and we're willing to try to incentivize to get that pie a little bit bigger so that there is more income into the city.
Anybody else on the commission?
I'm just worried that the discussions we've had tonight could, for some people, put up a big sign that says Yankton is not open for business. I'm worried that that is the message that we're sending, and that concerns me.
I'm going to ask again. Anybody else on the commission? Anybody else in the public?
I do have one more quick thing. I just want to say that Yankton is open for business, and this is exactly why we're having these discussions, because we welcome new businesses and our local people to start businesses as well. We're going to be supportive. We're going to keep growing the pie, as Al would say. I'm excited about the future. I'm excited that we're going to keep adding additional businesses to our to Yankton, and then again make it an even better community than it is now. And that's going to be by adding things that people care about and the things that we need, that we don't have all that leakage that we keep talking about, and we have lots of leakage here in Yankton. So let's be welcoming, please.
I'm not even going to ask if the commission has anything. I'm teasing. Any other commissioners? Because the minute I turn to the public, one of them will turn their mic on, so I'm not going to look at them. Anybody in the public? Roll call.
Weber.
Would you clarify the motion?
Bear with me, Brian. If I mess up, correct me, please. The motion on the table is before entering into incentivized transactions, city officials will complete a background check of the buyers.
Okay, this is Weber. No.
Benson.
No.
Brunig.
No.
Hanoff.
Yes.
Johnson.
No.
Minor.
No.
Schramm.
No.
Villanueva.
No.
Mayor Mosher.
No. Motion fails. Still under economic development incentives. I don't say that lightly. I do appreciate all of our discussion tonight. It's been a lot. There is one question that has went unanswered through all of our discussion tonight that City Manager Leon needs clarification on, and that is, are there any commissioners interested in adding incentives somehow to our toolbox for current businesses? Amy, did I clarify that right?
Correct.
I'm seeing head shakes, no. So at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Not, but everybody can keep their thinking caps on, and if there's anything that comes across that they may think of that is an idea, to definitely share that with the city manager. Commissioner Villanueva, did you?
I'll share it with city manager.
All right. Anything else then under economic development incentives? City Manager Leon, did you get the direction you and city staff need to move forward?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Then we'll move on to number 3 is consideration of memorandum 23-174 regarding the request for a new retail on-off sale malt beverage license for July 1, 2023 to June 30th, 2024 from Event Central, Matt Evans, owner, 2101 Broadway Avenue. Before I ask for the pleasure of the commission, Amy, I know when we discussed this with the media, you clarified some things that you wanted them to keep in mind, maybe sharing that with the city commission as well.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and I timed out on my iPad here, so I got to get to the right commission agenda item, so please just hang on one second.
Right here.
Okay, in your packet, there's a map of Event Central there, so you can see it's color-coded. The red or pink highlighted would be the areas not included in the license, but everything else in the yellow highlighted area would be included, including the parking lots. And so we can explain statutorily how that works if you want, but I just wanted people to be aware that's what it is. So we're talking about that footprint. And the applicant is here if you have any questions for the applicant.
Yep, Ross, I am curious, how does that work with a mixed use like this with one request coming in?
Lawful. So basically, as long as all of his space, it's only his space, it's all one sales tax ID, he's authorized to do that, with the idea being that as spaces are leased by others, without having an additional meeting, spaces can, let me phrase this a little differently, the footprint can shrink without a subsequent meeting. It can't expand. So this is essentially the largest footprint that he could present to you, with an understanding that that he doesn't know what's going to go in every space yet. So it leaves the owner of the mall maximum opportunity to do with the space what he wishes. It also, in talking with the Department of Revenue in their licensing division, we talked through what are the limits, including the parking areas and stuff like that. And the essential limitations are, if he has events, he has to confine them. So it is, that way he can have outdoor venued concerts or tent type venued activities that could serve under this particular license, but he would have to control access to be compliant with the law. But that would be on him at that point. It's not a problem for law enforcement.
And Ross, just to clarify with the commission, my understanding of state statute then is everything that's in the footprint, if the owner feels is appropriate, patrons can move between the spaces within that footprint.
Yes.
So, I could take my glass of wine from the Coach store over to Louis Vuitton and we'd be all good.
So, but that's functionally, that's not how it's going to happen, though, because the common areas also function like the parking lot, the hallways and stuff. There would have to be in order to use alcohol in those common spaces, it would need to be sort of cordoned off in order to control access. Otherwise, they have
To the
problems.
places that don't.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Matt, I see you at the microphone. Anything to share with the commission before I ask for the pleasure of the commission, or do you want to see if you actually get a motion first?
Basically, like if you have any questions, just ask me. I think it's pretty straightforward. We do want to have events there. I think it'd be great for Yankton to come together as a community and, celebrate, whether it's Yankton or something else. That's kind of what we're looking for, basically. And like Ross said, the only reason why the footprint is what it is because we don't know what's going to be there. And we were actually guided by the state to do this because they said the easiest way is to do it this way because it can always shrink and you don't have to come back and say, well, here's a new map. We just got a tenant this week, and then, like we just got Broburger last week, and then another one is coming in the next week. And it's like, I'd be here every month saying, can I change my map? So they actually said that this was the best way to do it. So I coordinated with them and the city, and then I color coordinated it for the city also to make sure it was right.
Well, as somebody with an elementary education degree, I appreciate the color coding.
Thanks.
Yeah.
It's a little bit outside of the lines.
It
on a
is, but
couple of
again,
them,
I'm
but-
used to that at the elementary
Sorry.
level. Coach Miner, or Commissioner Miner might have other thoughts, but I'm sure she appreciates the color too. All kidding aside, thank you for that clarification. What is the pleasure of the commission?
I do have a quick question.
Yep.
So in theory, maybe you're thinking about this, you could cordon off the entire parking lot and have.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Just making sure.
Yes.
We do, with this, just for my understanding, as you have tenants come in, those will be subtracted from this because they'll be underneath a different sales tax ID, correct?
Correct.
Okay, that's the clarification that I'm looking for. So it'll just be under your sales tax.
Okay,
ID.
so most, I don't even know if any, I would guess maybe one or two or something. Most mall owners, if that's what you want to call this, I guess they've been calling it for years, do not own stores within. So I already own, I don't know, 4, however many stores within under the same sales tax ID. So for instance, if I wanted to sell beer at Jodine's like it was before, then it's under this license. If I want to sell Jodine's at my golf simulator place that's coming up, then I can do that underneath the same sales tax ID. I don't have to just keep applying for the same ones. Any stores that I do in there, it would all be under the same sales tax and the same malt beverage license. It's just easier. It's the same thing with the parking lot. If I want to do a get together or whatever out there, it's just easier for it to be underneath the same sales tax and malt liquor instead of having 10 different ones.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'd make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any other commission discussion now that we have a motion?
Matt, I just continue to appreciate your creativity and your dedication to making this project everything it possibly could be for the community. It's very impressive. So congratulations and thank you.
And it's honestly, I can't, we had meetings, we had lunches multiple times about the movie theater, and trying to get stuff going, like conversations like that. 2, 3 brains are better than one. We had multiple lunches to figure out how to get this thing going for the community. If anybody ever wants to talk about anything, like, just let me know and we can figure out some kind of community development and like have our own little Sim City there too. Like I cannot tell you, like, I was actually in the last hour or whatever that you guys have been talking, like, I was on the planning commission forever, and I quit developing in the county, and I came here for this exact reason, because you guys are, like, you talked it out. It was great. There was no arguments, and it worked great. Like, you make me want to run for city commission. So, like, I appreciate how you guys work things out. It was great.
Right. Any other commission discussion, questions?
I would just say, Matt, I know you're tired. I know you're working 27 hours a day. But I hope you're starting to have a little bit of fun as the pieces are falling into place. And I hope you're feeling the enthusiasm of people who are excited about the project.
I do. And like I said, in the last hour, like, it just excites me just to see you guys, like, let's get this, and not like, what should we do to hold this back? We're open for business. I'm open for business. Yankton community is open for business, and that's what excites me. That's what gives me goosebumps, and that's what drives me to work 16 hours a day. So.
Well, you must be slacking, because I think Commissioner Minor said you were doing 27. So. Any other comments from the public or the commission? Roll call.
Benson.
Aye.
Brunick.
Aye.
Hanoff.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Minor.
Aye.
Schramm.
Aye.
Villanueva.
Aye.
Weber.
Aye.
Mayor Moser.
Aye, motion carries. Sentiments from the commission, Matt, keep doing great things there. We appreciate it. All right, under new business, Graham, I think, is still in the audience. Graham, if you want to go up to the podium here, we're going to work on new business number 1, which is an informational presentation and review by Graham Forbes, auditor with Williams & Company, PC, of the 2021 City of Yankton Comprehensive Annual Financial Report that you can see there is CAFR. Amy, anything, or am I good to just turn it over to Graham? Anything?
No, I would just turn it over, and then typically what we like to have, Mayor, if the commission is so inclined, is acceptance of the financial report audit.
Perfect. I have that down here to get, but I'll turn it over to Graham.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. I'm going to keep this quite short. I joke that I don't want to put people to sleep, and I really mean it this time. So I'm going to keep it short. So yeah, I just want to thank Lisa's here and Lori and Al and all that finance staff for helping us put this together. As the mayor pointed out, this is the annual financial report for the year ended December 21. So we're going back in time here a little bit. And I know that the city's making a big push to, get caught up on that, and hopefully I'll be here and seeing you again here soon if everything works out here. So very quickly, I'll run through very, very quickly, high level here on page 1 of the report that looks like most of you have in front of you is our opinion, and as aptly named on that bottom middle of the first page there, it says, in our opinion, the financial statements are fairly stated in all material respects. So, that's what we're after. There's no modifications, disclaimers, or any other, modifications or adverse items that are noted. So that's exactly what you want. No problems or issues there. The management's discussion and analysis that starts on page 4 is very good, comparative, useful information put together by city staff. So if you're, not wanting to flip through all 90-some pages, but want a quick snapshot where are we at compared to last year, that MD&A is a great spot to look. And then quickly, I'll just look at a few financial statements here quick with you, pages 20 and 21. That is the statement of revenues and expenditures for the governmental funds, which are basically all funds other than your enterprise or utility funds. And as you can see there, it's the general fund, special capital improvements fund, TID number 5, pool. And just quickly towards the bottom of the page, that net change in fund balance, if you will, that's our net income in the private sector individuals. That's an equivalent line item to what that would be. So you see the general fund, had a very, stable year, small increase, special capital improvement fund, a rather large increase in net fund balance, and that fund will fluctuate widely as projects are taken on by the city, some sales tax dollars will accumulate, project comes along, the spend down, so you'll see big fluctuations there. TID number 5, no change, which no surprise there as the nature of those TID funds work. And then pool capital construction, kind of the opposite effect of that special capital improvement fund, where it's kind of the spend down phase back in 21 of some dollars raised and borrowed for the pool capital construction. So no surprise that fund balance decreased as the project was underway in 21, dollars are being spent towards that end. So no problems, issues, concerns there. On pages 25 and 26 are similar statements only for the proprietary funds, which in the city's case, in general, are the utility funds. And there towards the bottom of the page again, the change in net position, all positive for the water and wastewater funds, a small decrease for the non-major funds, but overall, a good, healthy result there for the year ended December of 21. Again, if no questions, starting page 29 are the notes to the financials. Not going to get into the detail there, but if you want to dig into any county policy, disclosure, greater detail on anything in these statements, those notes are a great place to start with that. Starting on page 55 is Exhibit 8, which is the budget to actual comparison schedule, which just like it sounds for the general fund in this case, we're taking the final budget as amended or with any supplements that were passed and compared those to how did we actually end up for the year and any variances over or under those amounts on that final supplement or budget. As you can see for the general fund, especially in the expenditure area, which is where we focus, that's where the legal level of control is. No individual department or area on the expenditure side was over budget, so that's obviously positive for the city from a budgetary aspect. And again, which helps drive some of those positive outcomes that we just looked at. So, from there is more detail on the budget, any revisions, appropriations, a bunch more schedules and detail on some of the other post-employment and benefits, as well as the city's involvement in the state South Dakota retirement system, a bunch of information and disclosure related to that I'm not going to dig into. And then starting on page, sorry for this whirlwind here, but on page 54 is when we have the financial statements to the non-major funds of the city, which would be all the formula-driven requirements for how they're disclosed, all the smaller governmental funds of the city, followed by the smaller proprietary funds of the city. And then finally, starting on page 84, is the schedule of expenditures of federal awards, where the city discloses the federal dollars that were expended by type during the calendar year. And then following that is required reporting that discusses the compliance with those federal regulations, as well as disclosure of that the audit was done in accordance with government auditing standards and any findings or compliance issues related to those. So I'll stop for breath here quick, but and not take any more of you guys this evening. Unless you have questions, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you might have.
So Graham, high level, and I think you said it, no glaring issues, nothing that kind of needs to be on our radar. As you know, we're going to be transitioning. Al thinks he's leaving us, so we're putting a contingency plan in place with Lisa. Anything there that you're seeing or anything high level for us to keep on our radar as we move forward into the 2022?
I don't believe so, no. I mean, just, I know the city's focus is getting, these produced a little more timely and taking steps to make that happen. And no, from a financial standpoint, like I said, I think 21 was a positive year and just getting, moving forward into 22 and then, 23 quickly after that. But no concerns or other issues, Mayor, no.
Graham, are you still doing the random discussion, kind of mini interview with a couple of the elected officials?
Yeah, that's a requirement we're required to do annually based on those government auditing standards where we randomly select one. I know many of you I've had conversations with. We're required to do one conversation with an elected official each year and then randomly pick other employees and individuals of the city throughout, the engagement each year. Just to have, basically provide a sounding board for any concerns, issues, things like that they'd like to disclose. There's no, other than elected official, no other rhyme or reason to how they're selected or any of that nature. But yes, Amy, those are still happening.
And Graham, the material weakness that you found regarding due to the limited number of employees, the city does not have sufficient controls in place to ensure that all entries are properly recorded and that all other applicable adjustments are made. That's one that you've found every year for a number of years.
Yeah, I think if you look back, I think that new standard went into effect, I'm going to say a dozen or so years ago, give or take. And every one of these you'll see in that time frame will have that, as will probably 95% of the government reports our firm issues. Just to keep it very short, basically what that standard says is if we're required to propose an adjustment to fix, correct, change any number in this financials, then the city, in this case's internal control over financial reporting, must not be operating correctly because it wasn't perfect. So whether you have one or several hundred journal entries proposed of the material size or quantity, you're going to find that. So, just even this evening, Lisa, made the comment of, she wants to learn from each year and do things better. And so it's that kind of attitude we appreciate where, even though there probably are less journal entries, I'm not going to state that as I don't know the exact number of entries we had in 21 or the year prior, but I know the city is, especially that finance staff, and committed to try and learn and improve the financial reporting every year. So.
And I would tell you, Graham, to leave your calendar open because we are not going to be late on 2022.
Very good. Discussions are in place.
If I have
already,
anything to
so
do
yes.
with it, we are not going to be late on 2022, so keep your calendar open. Other comments, questions from the commission?
I'll make a motion that we accept the comprehensive annual finance reports.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any commission discussion? Anybody in the public? Roll call.
And this is without a background check too, right?
Al, roll call.
Sorry. Brunig.
Aye.
Hanoff.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Minor.
Aye.
Schramm.
Aye.
Villanueva.
Aye.
Weber.
Aye.
Benson. Mayor Mosher.
Aye, motion carries. Thanks, Graham, for, I know this has to be done, but I think this is year number 7, I think, of listening to your presentation for me, and I appreciate all the work you do in working with our finance office on this. I know Lisa's mentioned a couple of times being able to call and talk to you and work through some things, so I appreciate you doing that.
Yep,
for your help here.
we appreciate them being proactive and looking to, do things correctly from the get-go, and that's appreciated, so.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Number 2 under new business is consideration of memorandum 23-172, recommending the approval of resolution 23-54, increasing the firefighter call pay stipend from $10 to $30 per call and drill, retroactive to January 1st, 2023. Before I ask for the pleasure of the commission, one thing I want to state publicly is that myself, Commissioner Weber, and Commissioner Villanueva will not be participating in the discussion, nor will we vote. For all of you not aware, Jerry serves as chaplain for the fire department. Mike is an active firefighter, and my husband is also on the fire department. So to make sure that we don't impact any of this, we will not be in the discussion. So I will ask Amy to walk you through this before we move on.
Yes, Honorable Mayor, members of the commission, we talked about this during our budget session and even prior, working through the strategic plan with the Yankton Volunteer Fire Department. Part of that was to get up to speed with a couple things, one being the pension with the insurance check, and that was done already, and then budgeting for an adjustment in the call pay that's received. That was set by resolution. It has to be set by resolution. So previously was set at $8, although our firefighters have been receiving $10. There may be a resolution somewhere out there saying $10. We can't find it. So we need to set that, and we've talked about $30 for call pay, and also making that retroactive to the beginning of the year because we've been working through these changes, gosh, now since late fall. Chief Linke and President Miller are here from the fire department if you have specific questions. However, we believe this is both the right thing to do, also provides a retention and a recruitment opportunity for the very active and, costly, really, role that our firemen and firewomen, fire professionals, I should say, have when it comes to serving our community. So for the sake of time, that's all I'll add unless there's questions of me.
I move that we approve the memorandum.
Second.
I said I wasn't going to comment, but I do have to run the meeting. So we do have a motion and a second. Is there any commission discussion on this? Come on, somebody make Chief Linke or President Miller go to the podium. Is there,
I'll just say we do really very much appreciate the work that the fire department does, and I think this is well-deserved. A lot of time has changed since we had set this at $10, so it's time to move it up. So thank you for your dedication.
Anybody in the public want to make a comment? And any last comments from the commission? Roll call.
Hanoff.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Minor.
Aye.
Schramm.
Aye.
Villanueva.
Abstain.
Weber.
Abstain.
Benson.
Aye.
Brunig.
Aye.
Mayor Mosher.
I will abstain for reasons previously stated, but with that, we still have a majority of the commission, so it does pass. Thank you, Chief Linke and President Miller, for sitting with us tonight. It's a unique date, and so I know it means something in the fire department. So thank you for sitting with us tonight. I know it was drill night, so you would have been with your brothers and sisters in blue, so I appreciate you being here.
Mayor Mosher?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you sure we can't have them give some type of speech? Okay.
In the interest of time and knowing how long Chief Linke can drone on about something, if we give him a mic, I think we'll move on. No, I'm teasing. So, yes, thank you for your work. Number 3 under new business is consideration of memorandum 23-173, recommending the authorization to sublease the Chan-Gurney Airport Hangar number 15. That is airport hangar owned by Chris Nelson, and he wants to sublease that to Dale Bakke. What is your pleasure?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any commission discussion on it? Anybody in the public? Roll call.
Johnson.
Aye.
Minor.
Aye.
Schramm.
Aye.
Villanueva.
Aye.
Weber.
Aye.
Benson.
Aye.
Brunig.
Aye.
Hanoff.
Aye.
Mayor Mosher.
Aye, motion carries. Next on the agenda is other business, and unless anybody's going to throw anything at me, I do not have anything under other business in front of the City Commission meeting tonight. So with that, I would ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting of September 11th, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Anybody abstaining? We are adjourned. It was a long evening, but I thank everybody for their input and discussion tonight. Have a good rest of the week.